Chapter 763. Last time, when He Bien brought Dien Dien up the flaming river to search for a cure, he had suffered because of his lack of experience. This time, when he brought Dien Dien up the flaming river again, he learned to be smarter. He was even more vigilant of the people and things around him. Anyone who tried to get close to them, no matter who they were, would be killed. The D mountain tribesmen might seem friendly in Yanjiao, and He Bien always had a smile on his face, but anyone with sharp senses could sense the murderous aura emanating from them. It wasn't directed at Yanjiao, it was just that they couldn't hide their murderous aura. Then, they looked at the wooden raft with the large shells. There were many bloodstains on it that hadn't been washed away by the river. Some belonged to them, and some belonged to the people and beasts they met along the way. Plus, the D mountain tribesmen had just gone through a battle of life and death. They were at their peak, and they would kill anyone who dared to mess with them. He Bien didn't hide anything from Xiao Xian about the suspicious people they met along the way. After all, the D mountain tribe lived far away, and outsiders rarely came here. However, it was different here in Yanjiao. If these people were really from the other side of the sea, they might be a threat to Yanjiao. It was better to be on guard against them. I almost forgot. He Bien came to the 3 large shells with all kinds of seashells, but these weren't what He Bien was looking for. He looked at the 3 large shells and opened one of them. Among the many smaller shells, there was a slightly larger shell that was about the length of an arm. This shell looked like 2 hands with their fingers crossed. The cracks were stuffed with something and water was seeping out. After He Bien carried it out, he used the sharp cornerstone in his hand to skillfully pry it a few places. Then, with a little force, the shell was pried open. Inside, there were many small fishes with their bellies turned up. Xiao Xian pointed at the dead fishes and looked at He Bien in confusion. Dead fishes? No, these people aren't dead. They've just been fed medicine. It's like they're dead, He Bien said. When they were still in the D mountain tribe, they would sometimes catch a lot of fish, but they couldn't kill them all at once. Some people didn't like to eat dried fish, so the D mountain tribesmen found a medicine that could make the fish fall into a deep sleep after eating it. This way, the fish would stay fresh for a long time. When the D mountain tribesmen wanted to eat them, they would take the fish out of the medicated water and put them back into normal water. After a while, the fish would wake up again. He Bien got someone to fill a bucket with river water and put the 20 small fish into the bucket. The water in the shells had been sprinkled with medicine. As long as the fish were removed from the water, they would wake up again. However, if they don't wake up in 3 days, they might never wake up again. However, from the looks of it, they will definitely wake up within 3 days, He Bien said. If it had really been killed by the potion, the fish would not have remained in this state. They often came into contact with fish, so of course they would know if the fish's body was normal. This is a gift from the shamaness. The last time she came here, she saw your lake and heard that you raised fish, so she caught some fresh ones. Oh, she also made some dried fish and put them in the shells. He Bien put the 20 small fishes into the bucket and shook them one by one to confirm that there was really no problem. What kind of fish are these? Xiao Xian looked at them. These small, spindle-shaped fishes were only about the length of a palm. Their heads and backs were greenish-black, but they were darker in color. He couldn't tell what they were from their appearance. There were fishes that looked similar to them in the flaming river. They're cloaked turtles. Because when they grow up, they look like they're wearing hard armor. Don't be fooled by how small they are now. When they're just born, they're not even as big as my fingernail. However, when they grow up, they're bigger than your house. Cloaked turtles are one of them. Also, cloaked turtles are enemies with the D fish in the sea. When they meet, they will fight to the death. In the past, we helped the D fish fight against the cloaked turtles. We also often go to the river to catch their young fish to eat because the cloaked turtles will go upstream to give birth. However, after giving birth, they will return to the sea. These small fishes grew up in the river, so I'm sure you can raise them here too. He Bien told Xiao Xian everything he knew. Actually, they didn't know much about the habits of the armored turtles, but they used to be on the same side as the D fish. They were also enemies of the armored turtles, so they often observed their movements. What do they eat? Xiao Xian asked. They eat. He Bien was stunned. They only knew that Yanjiao raised fish and other animals, But they didn't have any experience in this area. If they were hungry, they could just go fishing. There was no need to raise them. When Xiao Xian asked this question, He Bian stuttered. Just put them in the water. They'll grow, right? Seeing He Bian like this, Xiao Xian knew he couldn't get an answer from him. Sigh, they'll eat themselves in the water. When they're bigger, you can eat them. They grow really fast. He Bian felt that Dian Dian was really smart. They didn't bring any large sea beasts here, but they brought these small fishes. The Yin Jiao knew how to raise them. As long as they grew up, wouldn't they be as big as large sea beasts? Xiao Xian was speechless as he looked at He Bian, who was inexplicably proud of himself. If it was that easy to raise animals, it wouldn't have become a skill valued by the tribesmen. After delivering all the gifts, they followed Xiao Xian to the Flaming River Castle. The next day, He Bian left with his men. They were worried that something might have happened to their tribe. After all, the war had just ended. As for the Flaming River Castle, although they were surprised, they still preferred a quiet place with fewer strangers. The D fish didn't disappear. After they lost their fire seed, many of them escaped. Now, we D mountain tribesmen kill every D fish we see, He Bian told Xiao Xian before they left. After they returned, the D mountain tribe would truly start a new life. They just didn't know what the future held. Under He Bian's command, the 50 or so people jumped into the river. When their heads popped out again, they had totemic tattoos on their faces. They waved their thick, scaly arms at Xiao Xian and the others before diving back into the water. Under the river, dozens of water arrows shot downstream. They were much faster than boats. No wonder He Bian and the others didn't take too long to swim back. The bamboo rafts were pulled by humans. They thought that using wooden oars was too slow, so they unloaded the rafts on their way back. They didn't need to pull the rafts, so the rafts could move even faster. Xiao Xian returned to the mountain and moved the pearls and shells to Guizei's place. The other 4 shells and salted fishes were moved to Gigu's place for him to distribute the food. These were seafood. Many people in the tribe hadn't eaten them before. It didn't matter if they were used to the taste, they still wanted to try it. As for the armored fishes that He Bian brought over from afar, Xiao Xian thought about it and decided to dump them all into the new man-made river around the trading point. Because the Flaming River Bridge was directly across the Flaming River, it was more troublesome for ships to travel up and down the river. Hence, under Xiao Xian's suggestion, the Yen Jiao dug an arc-shaped man-made river channel around the Flaming River Castle and the planned expansion site. The 2 intersections of the river channel and the Flaming River were blocked with gates. This prevented dangerous fishes like piranhas from entering the river. Now, there were only some small aquatic animals that weren't a threat. Since Xiao Xian didn't know how to raise these armored fishes, he decided to dump them into the river. They didn't dump them in the man-made lake at the headquarters because it was the green duck's territory. Xiao Xian was worried that these armored fishes would be eaten by the green ducks before they could grow up. Even if the green ducks didn't touch them, Xiao Xian was still worried that these armored fishes would threaten the other fishes in the lake. After all, a fish that could fight against the D fish definitely wasn't an ordinary fish. The 20 armored fishes in the bucket all woke up the day after He Bian and the others left. They didn't look very energetic, probably because the effects of the medicine hadn't worn off yet. Xiao Xian waited for a day. When he saw that their fins were moving more vigorously, he carried the bucket and walked over to the other side of the river. The pterosaur followed Xiao Xian, but the withered leaf birds didn't cross the bridge. Their range of activity was limited to the headquarters. They would be afraid if they left this area. There were too many unfamiliar scents on the other side of the river. After following them for a while, they returned to the headquarters and stood on the branches, chirping cha-cha. Unfortunately, the pterosaur ignored them and continued to follow Xiao Xian across the bridge. Don't eat these fishes. If I find out that you're secretly eating fish, I'll feed you to Caesar, Xiao Xian warned. It wasn't clear if the pterosaur understood, but it looked into the big bucket Xiao Xian was carrying, chirped, and continued to follow. Xiao Xian ignored it and continued to walk towards the man-made river. The Yanjiao soldiers guarding the bridge were also curious. They watched as the Great Elder carried the bucket and walked towards the river. When he reached the river, he poured the contents of the bucket into the river. "Great Elder, what are you pouring?" someone asked. "Fish," Be careful. Don't let anyone fish in the river, Xiao Xian said. The soldiers nodded. They would definitely keep their eyes open and keep an eye out. The 20 armored fishes were poured into the river and quickly disappeared. The speed at which they swam was completely different from when they were in the bucket. The sluice gate might not be able to stop these small fishes. Perhaps they could find a gap and swim out. After all, they were still small. However, Xiao Xian couldn't care less. He didn't care if these small fishes could really grow up. Thinking about Gan Xie and Wu He, whom he had left at Yixi's place yesterday, Xiao Xian carried the empty bucket and walked towards the trading point. After Xiao Xian left, the pterosaur spread its wings and glided to the side of the river. It stared at the water for a while, then let out a series of strange chirps. This was clearly different from its usual chirps. Every time it chirped, it would make a series of chirps. The last chirp was especially long. After a while, it didn't see any reaction from the river. Instead, it called the soldiers guarding the bridge over. Don't eat the fishes in there. The great elder will be angry. The soldier waved a spear in his hand, trying to scare the pterosaur away. The pterosaur, who was standing at the other end of the river, saw that someone was coming. It flapped its wings and flew to a nearby tree. It looked at the river again and chirped a few more times. A greenish-black figure swayed on the surface of the water, then dove back into the water. Seeing this, the pterosaur flapped its wings and flew away. The soldiers at the other end of the river saw that the pterosaur was finally chased away and went back to guarding the bridge. Not long after, the pterosaur flew back with a fish in its mouth. It had caught it from the flaming river. The soldiers at the bridge watched as the pterosaur tore off the fish and threw it into the water. After a few times, it would chirp again. What is it doing? The soldier at the bridge asked his comrade. Feeding fish to fish? The other guessed. Are we going to do something about it? Let's not, right? It didn't eat the fish in there either. When the time comes, we'll just have to inform the Grand Elder and see what he decides. That works too. As long as the pterosaur didn't eat the fish in the river, they wouldn't chase it away for now. At the same time, there was only one fish swimming in the man-made river. Soon, a second and third fish appeared. Not long after, there were more than 10 fish swimming in the river. After tearing the fish into pieces, the pterosaur threw the carcass into the river and flew back to the Flaming Horn headquarters without a care. There were too many unfamiliar auras here. It felt safer to stay in the headquarters. In the trading zone. When Xiao Xian arrived at Yixi's place, Yixi was writing something. When he saw Xiao Xian, he didn't stop writing. He just glanced at him and continued writing. Grasshopper was still curled up beside Yixi. Although there were fewer spines on his back, they weren't completely gone. This proved that he was still very nervous. Wu He and Xiao Xian were where they were when Xiao Xian left yesterday. They were still where they were now. The only difference was that Wu He was standing up yesterday. Now, he was sitting listlessly on a wooden stool. Even his voice was weak. As for Gan Xie, he was exactly the same as yesterday. When he saw Xiao Xian come in, Wu He was instantly energized. He said to Xiao Xian, "Hurry up and take this person away. I will leave immediately. Really, I will never come to Yanjiao again." Yesterday, Xiao Xian said that Wu He could leave after answering Gan Xie's questions. However, Wu He didn't expect Gan Xie to ask him one question after another. He didn't expect Gan Xie to ask him one question after another. This guy doesn't sleep either. To Wu He, it wasn't a problem for him to not sleep for a night. However, he didn't want to face this stone face all the time. If he didn't answer, Gan Xie would use force to threaten him. His arm was almost broken. "How's it going?" Xiao Xian looked at Gan Xie. Gan Xie loosened his grip on Wu He's arm and shook his head lightly. He wasn't satisfied with Wu He's answers. At first, it was okay, but later on, it was full of lies. "I'm going to the Flaming River Castle. What are your plans?" Xiao Xian asked. "Let's go back." Gan Xie stood up and put on his hood. He followed Xiao Xian out the door. After he left, he glanced at Grasshopper. Grasshopper was so scared that all the thorns on its back popped out again. Gan Xie was just curious. He heard from Wu He that Grasshopper was a slave with both human and beast blood. Interesting. Half beastman, slave master, slave. It was completely different from the relationship between humans in the tribe. Gon Xie learned a lot from Wu He. After he returned to the Flaming River Castle, he went straight to the basement to lie in his coffin and think about life. Xiao Xian went to look for Zheng Luo. What's wrong? Is there a problem? Xiao Xian saw Zheng Luo and Duo Kang's serious faces. Zheng Luo passed the animal skin scroll to Xiao Xian. Take a look and you'll know. Xiao Xian took the animal skin scroll. The first thing he saw was the totemic patterns on it. This would let him know who sent it. The Lu tribe. Chapter 764. Now Yinjiao rarely contacted the Lu tribe. One reason was that it was too far away, and the other reason was that there was no need to contact them. The Yinjiao tribe had enough animals to raise. Most of them hunted in the forest, so they didn't need to trade with the Lu tribe. The Lu tribe didn't contact Yinjiao either. Xiao Xian knew that the Lu tribe didn't like fighting. They had always been good people, and several large tribes in the central region had always protected them, probably in case they needed the Lu tribe's help in times of shortage of food during a disaster. After the last disaster, the Lu tribe provided them with a lot of food. Although they rarely contacted each other, Xiao Xian had heard about the Lu tribe from the Longboat tribe and Feather tribe. It was said that the Lu tribe had a lot of complaints about Yinjiao. But it had to be related to the fire seed. The Lu tribe was probably one of the few large tribes that didn't want to merge their fire seed. Their main means of livelihood now was raising livestock, and they rarely had conflicts with other tribes. In the past, they had endured the provocations of the Wanshi tribe time and time again. To put it bluntly, they were cowards, but it was also a conservative and effective way. They knew how to survive stably. But now, Yinjiao changed everything. The merging of fire seeds came from the Flaming Horn tribe. First, the major tribes merged their fire seeds, then the other tribes in the central region merged their fire seeds. Either voluntarily or under coercion, they all merged their fire seeds one by one. All of them set their sights on a new goal, breaking the current situation. When the Lu tribe was in trouble, no one could help them effectively. The Meng tribe and Eight Limbs tribe were cooperating with the Longboat tribe. The Longboat tribe took some of them out to sea, and the rest helped to look after the Longboat tribe, in case someone attacked the Longboat tribe's nest while the fleet was away. The Longboat tribe hadn't finished migrating yet, but they would definitely move to the estuary in the future. Their hearts had already flown out, and they didn't want to be trapped inland. Their goal was the sea. As for the Lu tribe, the three of them didn't have time to care about them. They could only help a little, but they wouldn't help them all the time. The Feather tribe reared birds and brought back a large number of birds from the forest. They were also very busy. The place where the Feather tribe was located was easy to defend and hard to attack. Outsiders who weren't familiar with the terrain would find it hard to cause trouble for the Feather tribe. Now, the Feather tribesmen only wanted to manage their own territory. They didn't care about anything else, so the help they could provide was limited. It was said that the Thousand Masks tribe wanted to learn from Yinjiao and build a city. They also had to guard against external threats. They were also very busy and had no time to care about the Lu tribe's crisis. As for the tribes on the grasslands, they wouldn't care about the Lu tribe. They didn't have much interaction with the Lu tribe in the past. After much consideration, the Lu tribe could only ask Yinjiao for help. The Lu tribe's situation might be worse than what's written, said Zheng Luo. It was only written on the animal skin scroll that the Lu tribe's beasts were being snatched away by outsiders, but since the Lu tribe was forced to seek help from Yinjiao, which was so far away, it was clear that the situation was critical. It also says that they want to move their tribe. Zheng Luo gestured for Xiao Xian to focus on the last few sentences. According to what was written, the Lu tribe wasn't sure if they really wanted to move. They just wanted to move. They're really simple-minded. Duo Kong was very dissatisfied. He was actually willing to let the Lu tribe come over. After all, the Lu tribe was good at rearing beasts. They might be able to raise more beasts. Yinjiao wouldn't mind having too many beasts. But the Lu tribe had a primitive fire seed. They wanted to bring it over? No way. Yinjiao wouldn't want to see this happen. After all, it wasn't their own fire seed. Even if it was a distance away, it would still affect their totemic warriors. Didn't they see that the tribes near Yanjiao all had merged fire seeds? Rain tribe, drumming tribe, Taiha tribe, which one of them didn't have a merged fire seed? If the Lu tribe wanted to move over and rely on Yanjiao, that was fine. But first, they had to get rid of their primitive fire seed. Otherwise, if they brought it over, not only the Yanjiao people but also the other tribes around them wouldn't be happy. They didn't choose to merge their fire seed. Until now, it seems like only the Lu tribe hasn't merged their fire seed, said Jing Luo. Xiao Xian had already finished reading the words on the animal skin scroll. Today, the Lu tribe is like a chicken standing there, waiting for people to snatch it. It's a good thing they didn't merge their fire seed. If they did, all the beasts in their animal pens would have been snatched away and their people would be killed. What do you plan to do? Jing Luo asked Xiao Xian. Let's not talk about whether they'll move or not. The Lu tribe has already listed their rewards to Yanjiao. As long as Yanjiao helps them, they'll give everything to Yanjiao. Thinking about the number of beasts listed in the scroll, Duo Kong sighed. They're really generous. The Lu tribe's rewards were already close to 2/3 of their total beasts. Maybe the Lu tribe wants to use this opportunity to get rid of the excess beasts. That'll make it easier for them to move, guessed Jing Luo. Xiao Xian thought for a moment. I'll bring people over to take a look. Not for their rewards, but for the others. You want to use this to establish your authority? Jing Luo immediately thought of this. I heard that people from the other side of the sea have appeared in the Flaming River area. We can use this as a warning. It's not just people from the other side of the sea. There aren't many people who can safely cross the sea. Only a limited number of people have their eyes on the Lu tribe. Other than the outsiders, most of them are tribesmen who have already started to change, Xiao Xian said in a low voice. Tribesmen? After merging their fire seeds, their ambitions are magnified and they're no longer content with their lot. They don't have to stay in one place, so naturally, they'll set their sights on other places, Xiao Xian said. After all, most of the people living on this land are tribesmen. You mean other than scaring the outsiders, we have to do something to show the tribesmen who have other intentions? Jing Luo understood. Sometimes, being infamous isn't a bad thing. Back then, Yanjiao's ancestors made a wise choice by making themselves infamous. Xiao Xian thought about the other tribe's impression of the Yanjiao people. Although the Yanjiao tribe was famous now, they weren't fierce enough. In such a big environment, their fierce reputation was a very good shield. At least it could deter those who had bad intentions from targeting the Flaming Horn tribe. Xiao Xian, when are you leaving? I'll go with you. Duo Kong rubbed his hands. He was already itching to go. You can't leave, Xiao Xian refused. What? Why can't I? Last time, Ta went with you to the desert. This time, you're going to the Lu tribe to rescue them. It's my turn now. Duo Kong remembered this clearly. Between him and Ta, one of them had to stay in the tribe. You have to help Jing Luo keep an eye on the trading point. There are already people from other tribes nearby. Some of them are mixed in with the travel team. They're probably investigating the trading point, Xiao Xian said. Hearing this, Duo Kong didn't insist. Compared to the Lu tribe, the trading point was more important. Xiao Xian, are you bringing the guy in the basement with you? Duo Kong asked. If I don't bring him out, I won't feel safe leaving him here, Xiao Xian said. Gan Chia's situation was too special. If he suddenly went berserk, he could cause a mess in the Flaming River Castle. It was better to bring him out. Duo Kong thought about it and agreed. Only Xiao Xian could kill those puppets in the desert. Although Gan Chia was different from those slave puppets, in some ways at least he was revived because of Xiao Xian. Maybe if something happened, Xiao Xian would be able to think of a way to deal with it? It's good to bring him out, but Xiao Xian, have you noticed that he's getting more and more dumb? Duo Kong lowered his voice and said. Gan Chia's mood swings were already very low. He could maintain the same expression for the whole day. Duo Kong was curious. How could a person maintain the same expression all the time? Didn't he feel uncomfortable? They didn't stay in the Flaming River Castle any longer. Since they had decided to bring people to the Lu tribe, Xiao Xian had to inform the people at the headquarters and select some people to bring out. After exiting the trading point, Xiao Xian didn't cross the bridge directly. Instead, he walked further away. There was a suspension bridge over the man-made river. Xiao Xian continued walking from the bridge until he reached an inconspicuous place. There was no one else around. Xiao Xian looked around and walked to a spot. He lifted his foot and stomped twice. Not long after, the spot where Xiao Xian was standing was lifted up. A short and fat man with a full beard poked his head out. He was probably sleeping just now because his eyes were narrowed even smaller than usual. He looked out and yawned. This was a Ye tribesman. When he saw Xiao Xian, he immediately became attentive. "Grand Elder, is there anything I can help you with? Tell the others to be on the lookout for outsiders." Xiao Xian left him with this sentence. The Ye tribesman nodded profusely. He would definitely pass on this message, and he would do so as soon as possible. Xiao Xian's words meant that there were dangerous people coming from further away. Not only the other tribes living in the Flaming River region, but even the Ye tribesmen had to be on guard. After reminding the Ye tribesmen, Xiao Xian walked back. He sensed that the pterosaur was moving around where he poured the fish. When he walked over, he saw the pterosaur tearing apart a piranha fish and throwing its flesh into the river. It screamed as it did so. The guards around the stone bridge told Xiao Xian that the pterosaur had done this once before. This was the second time. Xiao Xian also saw more than 10 spindle-shaped figures swimming on the river's surface. They seemed to be fighting for food. Those were the fish he poured into the river. "Grand Elder, should we stop it in the future?" the guard asked. "No need. Just keep an eye on it." Xiao Xian didn't know why the pterosaur was doing this, but from the looks of it, the fish wouldn't starve to death with the pterosaur's food. After returning to the tribe, Xiao Xian had a discussion with the chief and shaman. The next day, Xiao Xian brought 500 people out. Gan Xie, who was wearing a hood and a cloak, also left with Xiao Xian. Just like what Xiao Xian said, he could go out and observe the changes in this world. He could also interact with more people from the other side of the sea. He could also ask more questions. After Xiao Xian left with his people, some people also left the Flaming River trading point, such as Wu He and the others from the Changla tribe. Wu He wanted to leave to play somewhere else, but he saw Xiao Xian leaving with his people. 500 people was already a big commotion in most places where there weren't many people. It was obvious that something had happened. The Changla tribe's curiosity was piqued again. Wu He and the others left the trading point and followed Xiao Xian's group. They wanted to see what was going on. At the Lu tribe's place. Ever since Yanjiao migrated, the Lu tribe's place had become much more deserted. Strictly speaking, they couldn't be considered part of the central region. They were more towards the side because they needed a large amount of land to rear all kinds of animals. The competition for territory in the central region was too fierce. If one wasn't careful, they could start a war. The Lu tribe had lived here for a long time. As traditional tribesmen, they wouldn't want to leave if they had a choice. But now, the situation had changed and they had become a target for many people. In the second year of the disaster, their animal pens started to lose their animals. At first, it was just the pens at the edge of the region. Later, more and more animals went missing. Even the people guarding the pens started to get injured. Now, the situation was getting worse. They were still thankful that they had a fire seed to scare off those thieves. But this didn't solve the problem. Now, their animal pens were still being lost and their casualties were increasing. Some people even began to worry. What would they do if those people gathered together to attack the fire seed of their tribe? Their fire seed was still a primitive fire seed. If their fire seed was gone, their tribe would be gone too. There were 3 choices. The first was to go to the grasslands. There were many animal-rearing tribes on the grasslands. There was also plenty of grass and water. But the good spots on the grasslands were already occupied. If they went there, they would have to fight with the tribes there for territory. The Lu tribe didn't want to go to war. They really didn't want to go to war because their tribe's population was decreasing due to external threats. War would reduce their population even more. They didn't want to go to war. The second choice was to go to the Thousand Masks tribe. The Thousand Masks tribe also knew about the Lu tribe's current situation, but they didn't help them. Instead, they watched coldly from the sidelines for a while and made a request. They were willing to accept the Lu tribe, but the Lu tribe had to merge with their fire seed. Other than that, there were other conditions, such as the distribution of animals in the pens. No matter what the conditions were, the Lu tribe couldn't agree immediately. The third choice was to go to the Yinjiao tribe. I still agree to go to Yinjiao. Yanjiao looked at the others present and said. He had interacted with Yanjiao many times. Compared to the Thousand Masks tribe, he trusted the Yinjiao people more. If we must merge with our fire seed, Yanjiao is definitely better than the Thousand Masks tribe, Yanjiao said with certainty. If Yanjiao can accept us bringing our fire seed over, it's not impossible to choose them, an old man said. But the others didn't agree, including Yanjiao. Don't even think about it. The Yanjiao people won't allow it. Do you know why the big tribes in the central region all let the other tribes merge their fire seeds? Because the fire seed makes them unhappy. Yanjiao sneered. Under the influence of the successive events in the tribe, he no longer cared about what he said. Even if the other party was an elder, he still had to wake them up when they said such childish thoughts. They couldn't see the situation clearly and dilly-dallied until now. As a result, the tribe's situation was getting more and more difficult. Even if they wanted to merge their fire seed, they didn't dare because there were too many people spying on them. Who knew if they would sneak up on them at a critical moment? Yanjiao was the one who urged the new chief to write the letter asking for help from Yanjiao. Yes, the previous chief of the Lu tribe was killed in a battle with outsiders. Not long ago, the tribe elected a new chief. Bai Xing was the strongest person in the Lu tribe, or else they wouldn't have chosen him at a time like this. Although he was strong, his foresight wasn't as far-sighted as the previous chief. Fortunately, he listened to Yanjiao's advice and wrote a letter asking for help from Yanjiao. Looking at the silent others in the tribe, Yanjiao was so angry that his head hurt. He walked away. You guys keep talking. Call me when you have a result. Walking out of the chief's house, Yanjiao looked at the people walking around outside. Their eyes were blank, and they looked absent-minded. Be alert! Yanjiao shouted. The people who were thinking about something were startled by Yanjiao's words. They looked around nervously, and when they found nothing unusual, they took a deep breath. In fact, they weren't so timid before, but a series of events, especially the death of the previous chief, had greatly damaged their confidence. Yanjiao looked at the state of those people and took a deep breath. He wanted to scold them, but after opening his mouth, he sighed and left. When they were facing the Wanshi tribe, they were able to live peacefully because they had the support of several other tribes in the central region. The Wanshi tribe didn't dare to do anything to them. But now the situation was different. Running away would not solve the problem. Those people were outsiders. Perhaps there were other people from other tribes who wanted to take advantage of the situation. But in Yanjiao's eyes, they were all predators. And the Lu tribe was like a stupid bird that was being raised. Facing threats from all sides, they still imagined that they could continue to live a peaceful life. No wonder the Yanjiao called their birds stupid birds. They were fat, but they didn't have strength or brains. Who was to blame for their current situation? The rule of survival in the forest was to catch the weak and stupid ones. Boss. A young warrior ran over from the animal pen, panting heavily. He looked angry. Boss, another stupid bird is missing. Now they also learned from the Yanjiao people to call their birds stupid birds, because Yanjiao also thought they were too stupid, so stupid that it annoyed him. Taken away again? Yanjiao felt tired in his heart. There were a lot of beasts in the animal pen. Although there were guards around, there were always loopholes. The people who were wandering around the Lu tribe would take advantage of these loopholes and destroy the animal pen. Then, they would use food to lure the beasts away. Among them, most of them were stupid birds. Judging from the marks on the edge of the animal pen, yes. The young man who came over was angry and helpless. How can they be so stupid? So stupid. Stupid. Yanjiao wanted to cut open the heads of those stupid birds to find out what was wrong with them. How could they be taken away by a fruit? The ancestors of the tribe trained these birds from their wild state to birds suitable for breeding. But in terms of breeding, it was indeed successful. Yanjiao used to think so too, but now, every time he heard that a stupid bird was taken away so easily, He only felt a sense of helplessness. If these birds were a little smarter, they wouldn't have been taken away so quickly. But things in the world were like this. Since they chose these stupid birds to be domesticated, they couldn't be blamed for being so easily fooled. Not thinking about that, Yanjiao asked again, "Did anyone get hurt?" That's good. As for those stupid birds, let's just let them be." At the same time, not far from the Lu tribe, somewhere in the forest, about 20 people gathered together in a circle. In the middle of the circle was a bonfire. Inside the bonfire was the stupid bird that was just taken from the Lu tribe. These people laughed, and the language they spoke was not the common language of the tribe. Chapter 765. Yanjiao walked around the animal pens. The guards didn't seem to be in a good state. Some of them were distracted while others were overly nervous. They lost a stupid bird today, so it was a good thing that no one was injured. Many times before, when they discovered thieves, the guards would fight with them. Casualties were inevitable. Of course, in order to prevent the animals in the animal pens from being stolen, these casualties were unavoidable. However, some people were still worried because they didn't know how long this situation would last. Humans would get tired eventually. They were in the open while the thieves were in the dark. The situation wasn't good for them. Yanjiao pondered. He had already sent out the letter asking for help a long time ago. He didn't know if the Yanjiao people would come. Just as he was thinking, someone rushed over. "Boss, someone's here." Yanjiao was overjoyed when he heard this. He jumped up and asked anxiously, "Are they Yanjiao people?" "No, they're from the Thousand Masks tribe." Yanjiao's excitement faded when he heard that they were from the Thousand Masks tribe. He scratched his head with a conflicted expression. "Boss, aren't you going over?" "The chief and the others are all there," that person asked. "Why should I go? They won't listen even if I tell them." "No, I better go. I don't want them to be fooled by the Thousand Masks tribe." Yanjiao hurriedly left the animal pen. When Yanjiao went over, the current chief of the Lu tribe, Bai Xing, was already talking to the Thousand Masks tribe. However, the atmosphere wasn't good. The leader of the Thousand Masks tribe this time was Dian Fa. Yanjiao had some understanding of Dian Fa. Although Dian Fa always had a smile on his face and seemed easy to talk to, he was actually a person who would change his expression at the slightest provocation. Now, the Lu tribesmen were really afraid to see him. Ever since they merged with their fire seed, the Thousand Masks tribe was no longer the same as before. No, it seemed that after merging with their fire seed, all the major tribes in the central region changed. At least, they didn't look like the Lu tribesmen. Yanjiao sighed and walked in. He heard Dian Fa say that the Thousand Masks tribe wanted to take in the Lu tribe. If the Lu tribe agreed, they would leave a place for the Lu tribe to live in. However, the Lu tribe had to pay a price. They didn't ask the Lu tribe to hand over a certain number of animals to the Thousand Masks tribe every year. They only needed to hand over half of their animals. Hearing this, even the Lu tribesmen who had been silent couldn't sit still anymore. If they only gave the Thousand Masks 1/3, or even 2/3, they would be fine, as long as the Lu tribe could survive this crisis. If they gave away 2/3 of their beasts at once, they were confident that they would be able to increase their numbers quickly. However, if they had to give away half of their beasts every year, it would be difficult for the Lu tribesmen. "That's not what you said last time," an elder shouted loudly. Because he was too excited, his voice was a bit strange and sharp, sounding ear-piercing. The last time Dian Fa came to talk to the Lu tribe, he said that the Lu tribe only needed to give the Thousand Masks 1/3 of the beasts they raised every year. Unfortunately, the Lu tribe wasn't willing back then, but now they were asking for more. Dian Fa smiled and glanced at the old man. When their eyes met, the old man subconsciously shrank back. "Last time, our chief only asked for a small amount because our two tribes are familiar with each other. Who knew that you wouldn't even agree to such a small amount of things? This time, our leader is angry, so he added another request," Dian Fa explained calmly. But you're asking for too much. This is considered a lot? Why didn't you agree last time? Now that the situation has changed, you should know that it's impossible for things to be the same as before. You can either become independent or join a stronger tribe. Otherwise, you won't even be able to protect your fire seed. Dien Fa was very clear about the Lu tribe's current situation. He knew who the people around him were. He wasn't just trying to scare the Lu tribe. If things continued like this, the Lu tribe might not even be able to protect their fire seed. With the Lu tribe's character, it would be a miracle if they could protect their fire seed. Right now, the Thousand Masks tribe had taken in many people from small to medium-sized tribes. They were currently building a city and lacked food. If it weren't for the fact that the Lu tribe was good at rearing beasts and had many beasts in their animal pens, the Thousand Masks tribe wouldn't have accepted such a weak tribe. Dien Fa laughed coldly in his heart. Don't say that I didn't warn you. If this continues, you'll be at a disadvantage. Also, who knows when our chief will change his mind. Dien Fa finished the green fruit in his hand in a few bites and casually threw the core on the ground. He stood up and prepared to leave. Just as Bai Xing and the others were about to say something, Dien Fa's aura suddenly changed. Under his animal hide clothes, there seemed to be something moving in the muscles on his back. The meridians extended from his neck all the way to his face. With a cracking sound, white bones appeared on Dien Fa's face. His entire face was changing. His eyes widened and his pupils dilated. His brow bones protruded and his eyebrows were pressed down. In the blink of an eye, Dien Fa had already turned around. He stomped on the ground and crushed the core of the fruit he just threw. A large footprint was instantly left on the relatively flat ground. Dust was splashed into the air, almost drowning people like a fog. In the midst of the dust, Dien Fa's usually smiling face was no longer smiling. The white bones that protruded from his face covered his entire face. He looked extremely ferocious. You couldn't judge a Thousand Masks tribe member based on their temperament. You couldn't judge them based on their usual appearance. You had to judge them based on their appearance when they used their totemic power. That was why Dien Fa's temperament was just like the specialized bones that covered his entire face. He looked like a ferocious beast that was about to go berserk. His aura was like a dark cloud that weighed heavily on the hearts of the Lu tribesmen. Seeing Dien Fa like this, Bai Xing was furious. You want to fight? Fine, let's fight. Just as he was about to make a move, he was held back by the elders beside him. Dien Fa glanced disdainfully at Bai Xing, whose face was red with anger. He had already told the chief that they couldn't speak nicely to the Lu tribesmen. The more they tried to be nice, the more they would drag things out until the crisis was over. Dien Fa didn't want that to happen. If he showed them a strong stance, they would naturally back down. Look, wasn't this the case now? A bunch of cowards. We need time to think, an elder said with difficulty. Wasn't the time I gave you last time enough? How long do you want to think? Dien Fa's cold voice rang out in the room. His tone was filled with impatience. Seeing that the Lu tribesmen were about to say something, Dien Fa waved his hand as if he was swatting flies. I'll give you 3 more days to think. After 3 days, I'll leave with my people. In other words, if the Lu tribesmen agreed to move after 3 days, Dien Fa would bring them to the Thousand Masks tribe's territory. If they didn't agree, he would wash his hands of this matter. They wouldn't care if the outsiders robbed or killed the Lu tribesmen. Since they didn't want to come to their territory, they wouldn't care about their business either. Dien Fa didn't allow the Lu tribesmen to say anything. In the end, Dien Fa brought the 500,000 Masks warriors to the Lu tribesmen's living quarters. They were treated to good food and drinks. Yan Jiao watched from the beginning to the end. He didn't say anything. He remained silent with a dark expression on his face. He didn't want to see the elders' attitude, but he knew that they were worried. He didn't know what to say. Should he join the Yanjiao instead of the Thousand Masks tribe? But the Yanjiao people didn't show up. He didn't even know what the Yanjiao people were thinking. 3 days, to the Lu tribesmen, was too short a time. The entire tribe was filled with an anxious atmosphere. This atmosphere was getting stronger by the second. The Lu tribesmen gathered together and discussed for 3 days without sleep. They argued for 3 days until their throats were hoarse. They still hadn't come to a conclusion. Yan Jiao had expected this, but there was nothing he could do. Although he was the leader of the tribe, there were still many people above him. his suggestion couldn't get the others to agree. Even Bai Xing, who had a good relationship with him, was pessimistic. As the sky gradually brightened, everyone became more and more agitated. It didn't matter if it was the people in the room or the other Lu tribesmen. The deadline was approaching. They had to give Dian Fa an answer. Early in the morning, Yen Fa's eyelids twitched. He had a feeling that something was about to happen. It was a bad feeling. After some thought, Dian Fa woke up all his subordinates. He was going to force the Lu tribesmen to make a decision. What if the Lu tribesmen don't agree? Are we really going to leave just like that? Asked 1,000 Masks tribesmen. Dian Fa was distracted and didn't answer immediately. Instead, someone beside Dian Fa said, "Of course we can't just leave like that. No matter what, we have to bring some things back. Since the Lu tribe can't protect their own things, it's better to give them to us than to let the outsiders take them all." Wait for an opportunity to take them? Good idea. Everyone, remember to take as much as you can. Don't let the outsiders take everything. Dian Fa didn't say anything as he listened to the discussion. He had the same thought in his mind. Sooner or later, the Lu tribe would be robbed by those outsiders who gathered here. Why should they leave empty-handed? The atmosphere at the Lu chief's place became even more tense because of Dian Fa's arrival. What's the result? I don't want to wait here forever, Dian Fa urged impatiently as he sat down on a thick animal hide mat that his subordinates had brought over. It's not the deadline yet, whispered an old man. Strictly speaking, the 3-day deadline would only end at noon. I don't care. Give me the result now. Dian Fa didn't want to give these people any more chances to delay. He didn't want to waste any more time. Dian Fa's eyelids twitched even harder. He raised his hand and pressed it against his eyelids. He made up his mind to solve this problem as soon as possible. The current chief of the Lu tribe, Bai Xing, was so angry that he clenched his fists. If it weren't for the elders beside him holding him down, he would have exploded already. Even as a chief, he had to endure this. It was so humiliating. He wanted nothing more than to die in battle like the previous chief. Bai Xing held his breath and didn't say anything. He looked at the shaman. The shaman sighed helplessly and said to Dian Fa, "Now isn't the best time to merge the fire seed." Dian Fa frowned. This was an excuse, but it was also the truth. If the Lu tribe failed to merge their fire seed here, they would be crippled. What would they do with a crippled tribe? We can go over first. We can merge after we get there. We must merge. Dian Fa emphasized. The shaman looked at Bai Xing after hearing this. This was the only thing they could do. Under the urging of the elders, Bai Xing took a deep breath and suppressed his anger. He was about to say something when his expression suddenly changed. The others in the room also had the same reaction. Yan Jiao stood up and rushed out. The Lu tribesmen might be slow when it came to other things, but they could sense the movements of their animals very quickly. As for the animals that were stolen, they were lured away on their own accord. When they left, they didn't make any movements at all. That was why the guards didn't sense them. At this moment, the 1,000 Masks people didn't see much movement at the beast pens. However, it was a different story for the Lu tribesmen. What's going on? Are those outsiders here again? Yan Jiao asked. I don't know. The person who was asked was still in a daze. What are you looking at? Go to the beast pens and see what's going on. Yan Jiao roared. He was so angry that the veins on his forehead almost popped out. What time was it now? How could they still be in a daze? As he spoke, Yan Jiao was about to rush towards the beast pens. It was safer for him to go there himself. These brats were probably under too much pressure. Their emotions were unstable. They might not be able to see anything. Just as he took 2 steps forward, Yan Jiao saw one of his team members rushing towards him with a big black bull on the leash. That bull was the one they used to pull their carts. It was different from the other animals. This bull was more alert to its surroundings. It had been through a lot and was more sensitive to danger. At this moment, the black bull was anxiously kicking the ground with its hooves. Something's wrong. Yan Jiao frowned. Then he thought of something and his face lit up. Could it be that the Yinjiao people were here? But what if it wasn't the Yinjiao people, but the outsiders in the forest? The man who led the black bull here looked at Yanjiao. Sometimes he was happy, and sometimes he was sad. His face changed constantly. The black bull stomped its hooves and looked in a certain direction. Yanjiao looked in that direction. The sun had just risen, but it was already bright enough to illuminate the ground. Everything could be seen clearly. Yanjiao walked towards the outskirts of the tribe. The person leading the bull followed him. After staring at the forest for a while, he still didn't see anything. Yanjiao turned to look at the bull. When he saw that the bull was looking up into the sky, he immediately looked up. There was the shadow of a bird high up in the sky. Soon, the bird's shadow grew bigger and bigger. It flew across the sky like a gust of wind. A figure fell from above. Dien Fa and the other Lu tribesmen were also walking over. Of course, they saw this scene too. Boom! It was as if a huge rock had fallen to the ground. The moment the figure touched the ground, a loud bang rang out. Cracks spread out like a spider web. The soil was forcefully peeled off from the ground and shattered in an instant. Countless clouds of dust rose into the air, as if a thick haze had suddenly appeared. The ground seemed to be shaking. Even the soles of their feet were numb. Dien Fa blocked the dust and squinted his eyes. There was too much dust and he couldn't see clearly who was there. He could only hear footsteps approaching. Tap, tap, tap. As the footsteps got closer, the dust was blown away. When he saw who it was, Dien Fa's expression turned even colder. He gritted his teeth and said, "Yanjiao Shao Xian?" Every word seemed to weigh 1,000 pounds. After he finished speaking, Dien Fa turned his head to look at Bai Xing and the other Lu tribesmen. His gaze was as sharp as a knife as he squeezed out a sentence from between his teeth. He gritted his teeth and said, "You really found Yanjiao people?" The higher-ups of the Lu tribe kept their discussions a secret. Dien Fa only heard that the Lu tribesmen might ask the Yanjiao people for help. He didn't think that these cowards would actually invite the Yanjiao people over. If the Yanjiao Shao Xian was here, then the rest of the Yanjiao people would be here soon too. These Yanjiao people were so far away. Instead of building their own city, they came here to ruin the Thousand Masks tribe's plans. Dien Fa's face twitched. He looked at the huge crater where Shao Xian landed and the cracks that extended outwards. Then he looked at Shao Xian, who was walking over as if nothing had happened. Even if he didn't want to, he had to admit that trying to compete with the Yanjiao people in terms of physical fitness was just asking for trouble. He dared to go against the Lu tribesmen, but he didn't dare to offend the Yanjiao people. Especially when the person in front of him was the Yanjiao Grand Elder Shao Xian, the person he didn't want to offend. No wonder his eyelids kept twitching since early morning. He had a feeling that something bad was going to happen. Dien Fa cursed the Lu ancestors in his heart. When Yanjiao saw Shao Xian, he felt as if the haze in his heart had finally dissipated. Seeing Shao Xian here meant that the Yanjiao people really wanted to help them. "Shao Xian, you're finally here." Yanjiao's smile was a little stiff under Dien Fa and the other Thousand Masks people's sharp gazes, but his eyes were filled with excitement. He looked behind Shao Xian and asked, "You're the only one here? The others are still behind us." "I'm here with another person," Shao Xian said. "Where's the other person?" As soon as Yanjiao finished speaking, he heard a scream from the forest. Not long after, he heard the sound of something being dragged through the bushes. A cloaked person was holding a stranger by the neck and dragging him over. No matter how the stranger struggled, hit him, or even scratched him with his fingernails, the cloaked person's grip didn't loosen at all. The cloaked person's other hand was dripping with blood. However, the stranger didn't have any visible injuries, so it was obvious that the blood was from someone else. Of course, this wasn't the main point. The Lu and Thousand Masks tribesmen all stared at the sword in the cloaked person's chest. The sword had pierced through the cloaked person's body, but there wasn't a single drop of blood. As the wind blew, the linen cloak at the man's chest stuck to his body, allowing others to see clearly that the sword had really pierced through the man. However, there wasn't a single drop of blood on the cloaked person's body. He was even able to walk over, as if he wasn't affected at all. "Did you get hit?" Shao Xian asked. "I'm fine." An emotionless voice sounded. Yanjiao and the others were dumbfounded. How could he be fine after being pierced through? Just as they were thinking about this, they saw the cloaked man use his bloody hand to grab the hilt of the sword in his chest and pull it out. After pulling it out, he held the sword in his hand and continued to drag the person as if nothing had happened. Yan Jiao and the others were speechless. The Thousand Masks tribesmen were speechless. Even the person who was being held by the neck was stunned. He forgot to struggle. The surroundings were deathly silent, and even the air seemed to be filled with an icy chill. Everyone who saw this scene subconsciously shrank their necks. Dien Fei's eyelids weren't the only thing that was twitching. His eyes were twitching nonstop. What kind of monster was this? Chapter 766. When Gan Xie dragged Gan Xie over, both the Lu and Thousand Masks tribesmen hurriedly moved aside, keeping at least 10 steps away from him. The scene just now was too strange. They hadn't completely regained their senses, and they couldn't understand it. Before their minds could catch up, their bodies had already stepped aside. This was a reflexive action in the face of danger. Xiao Xian looked at the sword in Gan Xie's hand. It was obviously from the other side of the sea, different from the style used by tribesmen. However, the craftsmanship was not as good as the Gongjia families, so he couldn't tell which organization these people belonged to. "How did you get hit?" asked Xiao Xian. With Gan Xie's abilities, he shouldn't have been stabbed so easily. "I wanted to ask something, but that person suddenly attacked," said Gan Xie calmly. Xiao Xian didn't ask who stabbed him. Judging by the blood on Gan Xie's hand, he knew what happened to that person. However, after this incident, Gan Xie definitely understood that the people outside were not as nice as the people in Yanjiao. People outside the tribe would kill at the slightest disagreement. Xiao Xian looked at the people around him, then asked Yan Jiao, who he was most familiar with, "Is there a place to rest? This isn't a good place to talk." Yes. Yan Jiao nodded quickly, then informed by Xing before bringing Xiao Xian to a house. Xiao Xian, does your friend need treatment?" Yan Jiao glanced at the silent Gan Xie and asked Xiao Xian. "No, this small injury is nothing to him," said Xiao Xian. Bai Xing and Dien Fa, who were further away, also heard Xiao Xian's words. They were even more shocked. This small injury? Gan Xie was stabbed. How could it be a small injury? Dien Fa's face twitched, but he didn't say a word. He didn't know what to say either. It seemed like the Lu tribe was really going to ask Yan Jiao for help. Fight with Yan Jiao for a person? Dien Fa didn't plan to do that for now. He couldn't find the best solution for the time being, so he glared fiercely at the Lu tribesman. After Xiao Xian walked away, he asked, "Are you going to join Yan Jiao?" The elders of the Lu tribe looked away awkwardly. They didn't want to meet Dien Fa's eyes, nor did they say anything. In fact, they were also conflicted. The Yanjiao people would definitely have other demands. If their demands were even more unacceptable than the Thousand Masks tribes, what should they do? Or perhaps, with the help of the Yanjiao tribes, they could get through this calamity first. Some elders of the Lu tribe agreed. According to their thinking, migrating the tribe or merging the fire seed was a matter of life and death for the tribe. How could they make such a hasty decision? He had to think things through. To put it bluntly, they had to drag it out for as long as they could. They had to get through this difficult situation first. While Dien Fa was hesitating about whether to stay in the Lu tribe and observe, Yan Jiao had already told Xiao Xian about the situation. Just as Xiao Xian had predicted, the Lu tribe's situation was worse than what was written in the letter. However, Xiao Xian was puzzled. They were already in such a situation, but these people were still hesitating. What are your chief and shaman thinking? If they don't agree to merge the fire seed, we can't let the Lu tribe go. Xiao Xian also told them about Yan Jiao's request. Merging the fire seed was a prerequisite. Otherwise, there was nothing to talk about. Of course, if the Lu tribe didn't choose to merge the fire seed, they would only come to help the Lu tribe clean up the surrounding forest. Then they would pack up and leave. They wouldn't care about anything else. Yan Jiao also had a headache. He was actually in favor of merging the fire seed. Although they wouldn't get used to it in a short period of time, the other tribes had already merged their fire seed. If they stayed the same, their fire seed would become their weakness. However, the elders of the tribe didn't agree. How about this? Go and talk to your chief, shaman, and the elders. Tell them about Yan Jiao's conditions. Xiao Xian didn't want the Lu tribe to go. It would be good if they went, but if they didn't go, Yan Jiao wouldn't lose anything. After all, they didn't lack food. Yan Jiao let Xiao Xian rest here first. He would go and talk to the people in the tribe. What he didn't tell Xiao Xian was that the Lu tribe would definitely migrate. They couldn't survive here anymore. Putting aside the troubles around them, just the internal problems of the Lu tribe. They raised livestock for a living. The ancestors of the Lu tribe settled here because they found a pond that was enough for them to live and raise livestock. However, the pond had dried up during the disaster. At that time, the previous chief suggested that they migrate. Unfortunately, the elders of the tribe strongly opposed it. Later on, there was also the matter of the fire seed, so it had been delayed until now. Yan Jiao's head hurt when he thought about the looks of those elders in the tribe. Yan Jiao relayed Xiao Xian's words to the others. Some of them agreed to merge with the fire seed and move to Yan Jiao. Some objected because they didn't want to merge with the fire seed. There were also some who didn't agree or disagree. It was a stalemate again. Bai Xing sat at the head of the table and didn't say anything. His eyes were staring at a certain spot, but they weren't focused. He allowed the others to argue while he thought about other things. After a while, Bai Xing suddenly asked, "When will the other people from Yanjiao arrive?" Yan Jiao, who was also in a daze, was nudged by someone beside him. He came back to his senses and said, "About half a day. They'll be here by tonight at the latest." Bai Xing grunted and didn't ask any more. He continued to daydream. After Bai Xing's interruption, the elders stopped arguing. Someone asked Bai Xing a question, but Bai Xing ignored it. His rough face still had a look that said, "I'm daydreaming, don't bother me." Knowing that Bai Xing, the new chief, was in a bad mood, the elders didn't look too good either. For a moment, the room fell silent. The sun gradually set. Xiao Xian went to take a look at Gan Xie. The person who was dragged back by Gan Xie looked like he had nothing left to live for. That person thought that he would be forced to reveal some secrets after being dragged back. He planned to grit his teeth and not say anything, or make up some lies to fool these tribesmen. However, he didn't expect that this person would ask him questions that he didn't even know how to answer. Which tribe is your ancestor from? When did your tribe merge with the fire seed? What does it feel like to merge with the fire seed? Why did you abandon your tribe and join other groups? Why did the tribe disband? How can a person not have a tribe? That person really didn't know how to answer these questions. Why did the tribe disband? How would he know? As long as he was happy, why did he need a reason? He thought that Gan Xie was crazy. His way of thinking was like that of a stubborn and conservative tribesman. Why must people exist in the form of a tribe? These tribesmen were a bunch of country bumpkins. In the end, that person got impatient and cursed at Gan Xie's ancestors. Gan Xie wasn't satisfied with this answer. The result of Gan Xie's dissatisfaction was that the person's neck was broken. "I'm going out for a while," Gan Xie said. "For what?" Xiao Xian asked. "Ask someone else." Gan Xie put on his hood and walked out. There were still many people in the forest around the Lu tribe. He had to use this opportunity to ask more people. When the Yanjiao people came, they would probably be scared away. Whether it was people from the other side of the sea or tribesmen who had merged with the fire seed, he wanted to ask them all. He especially wanted to ask the tribesmen who had just merged with the fire seed. He wanted to know their thoughts. Gan Xie was very persistent in this aspect. Xiao Xian didn't stop him. "Be careful of your head." After all, Gan Xie wasn't a puppet. Puppets could still be controlled to move without a head, but Gan Xie didn't know what would happen to him if he lost his head. Not long after Gan Xie left the Lu tribe, Xiao Xian heard an eagle cry in the sky. "They're here." Not far from the forest outside the Lu tribe, a group of people was running towards them. They even rested for a while before coming here to adjust their condition. The movement of 500 people was naturally different from that of Xiao Xian and Gan Xie. The people hiding in the forest had already noticed them. "It's the Yanjiao people." Some people could recognize them from the totemic patterns on their bodies. Are the Yanjiao people that strong? This was someone who wasn't familiar with Yanjiao. Who cares if they're Yinjiao people or other people? Our target is the Lu tribe. This was a group of people from the other side of the sea. Some people were already scared and started retreating further away. However, they didn't leave. Their greed made them want to take advantage of the situation. Some people moved closer to take a closer look. In front of the group, there was a bird about the same size as the Lu tribe's dumb bird. It didn't have big wings either, but its body wasn't as fat as the Lu tribe's dumb bird. Its head was even bigger. What kind of bird is that? Someone whispered to his companion. I don't know, but I'm sure we can roast it like the Lu tribe's birds. The person who spoke had just stolen a dumb bird from the Lu tribe this morning. He was still holding a bone with meat on it. As he chewed on the meat in his hand, he observed the group that was passing by. Someone's here, Guang said while riding on the forest Rakos. I can smell it, the others beside him said. The group of people in the forest didn't seem to want to hide completely. Otherwise, the Yinjiao group wouldn't be able to smell the roasted meat. How arrogant! Guang glanced at the forest. He reached for an arrow from his quiver and knocked it on his bow. The bowstring creaked as he pulled it. Bang! The vibrations of the bowstring seemed to be plucking at the nerves in one's brain, causing them to tremble. The arrow pierced through the gaps between the branches and broke through the leaves in front of it. The leaves that came into contact with the arrow were instantly pulverized. Before the sneer of the person who had been talking to his accomplice could fade away, he was interrupted by a whistle-like sound that rapidly drew closer. Bang! The arrow pierced into a tree trunk that was thick enough for 5 people to encircle. The entire arrow sank into the tree trunk. On the other side of the tree, the person who was leaning against the tree widened his eyes and looked down at his chest. The roasted meat in his hand fell to the ground. The green arrowhead had pierced through the tree trunk and left a hole in his chest. There was still red blood on the arrowhead. The blood flowed out along the arrowhead and dripped onto the ground. The other people around them couldn't help but cry out in fear and anger. However, when they heard the footsteps coming their way, they didn't dare to stay here. They didn't even care about their companions who were still breathing. One by one, they threw away the roasted meat in their hands and turned to run into the distance. The surrounding birds were frightened by the murderous aura of the arrow. They screamed and flew into the sky. Dian Fe stood at the border of the Lu tribe and looked at the flock of birds in the forest. His eyes were dark and unreadable. Soon he saw a group of people coming out of the forest. There were 2 fearsome beasts in the lead. One looked like a bird while the other looked a little strange. It looked like a tiger or wolf in the forest. However, it had hooves and made a clattering sound when it stepped on the ground. Bai Xing and the others who were discussing things in the house quickly came out when they heard the commotion. We're finally here. Xiao Xian walked over and looked at the net bags in the group. Guang and the others saw this and dragged the net bags over. Inside were people who were already dead. Their bodies were either cut by sharp weapons or shot by arrows. There was even a person with a hole in his chest. Blood was still flowing out. These are? Bai Xing looked at the people in the net bags. We hunted them when we passed through the forest, the person dragging the net bags said. Oh right, Grand Elder, we saw Gan Xie when we passed through the forest. He said he would be in the forest tonight and told us not to worry about him, a Yinjiao warrior said. Okay, you all must be tired from the journey. Rest first, Xiao Xian said as he looked at Yanjiao. Yanjiao had already arranged accommodation and food. When he saw Xiao Xian looking at him, he quickly said, yes, yes. Everyone follow me. You must be tired. Have some meat soup. Brother Xian, what about it? Guang pointed at the forest Rakos. Xiao Xian thought for a moment and said to Yanjiao, didn't you say that the stupid birds in your animal pen are often stolen? Let Xiao Jing go there. There's a nest there anyway. It can be guarded. Yanjiao wanted to say, your bird eats meat. However, he paused and said, okay, bring it to the animal pen. Xiao Xian patted the forest Rako's head with the back of his knife and said, guard it well. Don't worry, Brother Xian. I told it along the way. Guang flipped his braid and smiled brightly. Yanjiao was confused. What did they say to the bird along the way? He suddenly changed his mind. Was it really okay to put this ferocious bird in the pen of those stupid vegetarian birds? Guang took the forest Rakos and followed Yanjiao to the animal pen. The animal pen for the stupid birds occupied a large area in the Lu tribe. There were also many bird nests. Because of the continuous theft, many bird nests were empty. When Guang led the forest raccoons into the animal pen, a group of stupid birds who were walking casually ran away as soon as they saw a stranger. Those who were squatting in their nests also ran away, so there were more bird nests empty. Choose one to sleep in. Guang patted the forest raccoons and said. Yan Jiao was frightened to see the big-headed ferocious bird raise its claws and look at the bird nests one by one. Then it chose the biggest one and walked in. After stepping on it, it squatted down. Okay, let's go. Guang didn't look at it anymore and turned to leave. Is it really okay? Yan Jiao was still scared. It's definitely okay. It won't eat. If there's one less, you can deduct it from Yan Jiao's reward. Yan Jiao didn't say anything. So these people were so eager to guard the animal pens just to get their reward from Yan Jiao? Yan Jiao's people had already arrived. It was time for the Lu tribe to make a final decision. Dian Fa didn't leave yet. He was waiting for the Lu tribe's decision. Xiao Xian wasn't in a hurry. No matter what the Lu tribe's decision was, they would rest for the night and clean up the forest tomorrow. Their goal wasn't just to decide if the Lu tribe would move or not. In the forest, the people who were hiding in various places were already starting to get anxious. Should they stay here and wait for a chance to make some money, or should they run away first? Judging from the looks of it, Yan Jiao wasn't easy to deal with. Chapter 767. There were fewer birds in the forest at night, probably because there were people hiding there. The Lu tribesmen used to hear nocturnal birds chirping at night, but now there were fewer nocturnal birds. Therefore, the night was much quieter. Tonight was the quietest night. In the past, there would occasionally be strange shouts or wild laughter in the forest. Tonight, those sounds were gone. The Lu tribesmen knew that it wasn't because the people hiding there had left, but because of the arrival of the Yanjiao people. Those people had all gone into hiding. They watched quietly in the dark. They didn't give up on this fat piece of meat so easily. In the forest, a few people hid in one place, looking in the direction of the Lu tribe. Hey, do you guys think we should go to the Lu tribe's animal pen tonight and drag one out to eat? I'm a little hungry, someone whispered. In the past, when they were outside, they didn't have to eat a lot of good food. They just ate whatever they could find, as long as they didn't starve to death. In order to get more good food, they didn't care that much about food. But after living near the Lu tribe for a while, their appetites had grown. Ordinary food really couldn't satisfy them. It was hard to go from luxury to frugality. When the others heard this, they also thought of the Lu tribe's birds covered in meat and the smell of barbecued meat. Suddenly, their saliva secreted faster. Even the fragrance of the flowers in the forest at night smelled like barbecued meat. Why don't we go take a look? They were about to go to the Lu tribe's animal pen when they suddenly stopped. They frowned and looked in a direction. They didn't wear much clothing, and more than half of their limbs were exposed. Their skin could become extremely sensitive, especially at night. Their hair stood on end, but this didn't mean that they were afraid. Unlike other people, these people used the hair on their skin to perceive the movements around them at night. They were like the tentacles of a beast, able to perceive the airflow fluctuations caused by the friction between the bodies of the people around them and the air. At this moment, they felt someone approaching. They're here. Not long after, they heard the sound of footsteps. It wasn't someone from their group. The footsteps sounded strange. The time between each step was almost the same, and the strength of each step was similar. Just listening to the sound gave them a strange feeling. Who wouldn't be cautious when walking at night? Even if they had better eyesight than ordinary people at night, they still had basic precautions. However, the other party seemed to have no scruples at all. He was neither hurried nor slow, and every step he took was like a stroll. What was his motive for suddenly appearing here? Soon, they saw a figure slowly walking over from the forest in the distance. Other than the sound of footsteps and the soft sound of his calves rubbing against the grass, there was no other sound. He couldn't even hear the sound of breathing. They thought that this was the other party's method of concealment at night. The person didn't wear many clothes and was bald, so they didn't recognize him. Bush. A branch shot out from a nearby tree like an arrow and pierced into the person's foot. This meant that he had stopped. Gon Chia looked at the branches in front of him and then looked up at the trees around him. There was no one around, but he knew that there were people hiding in the trees. "I have a question," Gon Chia said calmly. There was no sound around them. They could only hear the soft sound of insects crawling on one of the trees. Gon Chia continued asking, "Are you people who left your original tribe and gathered together again?" He could feel that the blood flowing through their bodies was similar. The person hiding in the tree initially thought that the other party was also one of the people who had designs on the Lu tribe and came over to discuss cooperation. Who would have thought that he would ask such a question? Was he crazy? While Gon Chia was waiting for an answer, a black figure suddenly jumped out from the tree closest to him. The other party had a knife in his hand. The curve of the blade was exaggerated, almost forming a circle. The blade was covered in a layer of black so that it wouldn't reflect any light at night. The speed of the other party's knife was extremely fast. It moved around in the air several times like a ghost, making it difficult to see where the knife would land. The blade sliced through the air, making a whooshing sound. Gon Chia knew that this person was aiming for his neck. Many people would aim for fatal areas such as the heart or the carotid artery. After all, no matter how strong a person's body was, it would be difficult for them to survive such an injury. At first, Gon Chia didn't want to dodge. It wouldn't matter if his carotid artery was cut. He didn't have any blood to lose anyway. However, when he thought about how Xiao Xian said that he wouldn't be able to survive without a head, Gon Chia hesitated. The knife looked like it was going for his neck, but what if it cut his head off? Everything happened in an instant. From the other party's point of view, Gon Chia only paused for a moment. Soon, Gon Chia dodged the knife. He wasn't afraid of the knife at all. He shook his shoulder and collided with the other party. Gon Chia's body was stronger than the Yanjiao people. His bones were even harder than the Yanjiao totemic warriors. The person who attacked Gon Chia didn't look weak either. In fact, if Gon Chia and the other person were to be compared at the same time, the other person looked stronger. However, at the moment of collision, the sound of bones breaking could be heard. The other person was sent flying and landed heavily on the trunk of a tree. The crown of the tree shook from the impact. It looked like the leaves were about to fall off. The knife didn't injure the other party. Instead, one of the people on his side was sent flying. At this moment, the other people hiding in the tree were shocked. After a short moment, they surrounded Gon Chia. They could tell that Gon Chia was a very strong person. They had to work together to win. They didn't think about what would happen if they lost. After all, no matter how strong a totemic warrior was, he would be crippled under such a joint attack. The sound of joints cracking could be heard. Long claws popped out like the claws of wild beasts. It wasn't clear if the claws were special to their bones or if they were made of metal. They twisted their wrists and their fingers were like spinning knives. They slashed towards Gon Chia. Wherever they went, the air hissed. They were like poisonous snakes hunting in the dark. There were also people with strange knives in their hands. They slashed towards Gon Chia with a cold light that couldn't be seen in the dark. The 5 of them attacked Gon Chia with the weapons they were used to. The sound of punches and kicks, the sound of knives hitting hard objects, the sound of bones breaking, and the screams of people mixed together. It sounded like the cries of ghosts and howls of wolves. Even the trees in the area were shaking. The sound spread to the Lu tribe. The animals in the animal pen started to get restless. What happened? The Lu tribe guards looked over nervously. They didn't know what was going on. No one went out at night, right? No one. We don't go out at night. The Yanjiao people didn't go out either. That's good. Don't worry about it. Just guard your place. Don't worry about anything else, the leader said. Although he said that, the guards kept looking over at the forest from time to time. They wondered what was going on. Did the people hiding in the forest start fighting? Or did someone else come over? Ever since the incident happened, the Lu tribesmen had been under a lot of pressure. Every movement made them overthink. While the Lu tribe guards were distracted, not far from the animal pen where the dumb birds were kept, 3 figures took advantage of the fact that the moon was obscured by the clouds. They approached the animal pen. Although they were curious about what was going on in the forest, They knew that this was a good opportunity to make a move. While the noise attracted the guards, they would be able to make a move on the animal pen where the dumb birds were kept more smoothly. During this period of time, they had been working almost every day. They took turns. Today, it was one person, tomorrow it was another person. Tonight, it was the three of them. Even if the Yinjiao people came today and knew that the security here would be much tighter, they still couldn't help but feel greedy. These days, they had been living too well. They didn't care whether the Lu tribe's fire seed was extinguished or not. They were just used to coming over to lead a bird full of meat away when they were hungry and eating to their heart's content. Whenever they were hungry, they would come to the Lu tribe's animal pen. When they first came, they were a little more cautious. They were careful when they stole things to avoid the Lu tribesmen chasing after them. But later, they realized that more and more people were targeting the Lu tribe. The Lu tribesmen no longer went out. They just stayed in the tribe. Even if they heard provocations, they rarely went out. That was why they became bolder and bolder. They would even laugh out loud while eating and drinking. Some of them would even throw bones at the Lu tribesmen after eating and laugh at them. The Lu tribesmen were so angry that they stomped their feet. The Lu tribesmen didn't dare to come out. This was the consensus of everyone. They had nothing to fear. As for today, although they saw the Lu tribesmen coming to help, they still chose to come. They were hungry. It was just a test. It should be fine. They told themselves this in their hearts. At night, when the patrolling guards left, they approached the beast pens with familiarity. First, they observed their surroundings, but they didn't see anything different around the beast pens. The guards were still the same, and there wasn't anything different from before. Sure enough, it was all a bluff. One person laughed silently. He caught a fragrant fruit thrown by his companion behind him and tied it with a straw rope. Then he cut a few holes on the fruit to let the juice flow out. When the wind blew, the fragrance of the fruit flew into the distance. In the direction the wind blew, they could vaguely see a bird's nest on a tree. There was only one bird in it. The other birds were a little further away. They were cautious. They knew that they couldn't attract too many stupid birds at once. Otherwise, they would be too big of a target and easily alert the guards of the Lu tribe. The few times they were discovered by the Lu tribesmen, it was because they attracted too many stupid birds at once. So they were discovered by the guards, and it took them a lot of effort to escape. So, since then they learned to be smart. Every time, they would pick a bird that was a little further away from the flock and nested in a bird's nest alone. The person holding the fruit approached the fence of the animal pen and skillfully threw the fruit towards the blurry figure. The fruit was tied with a straw rope. It drew an arc in the air and stopped about 10 meters away from the bird's nest. Because the ground was covered with grass and the fruit was soft, it didn't make too much noise. Although stupid birds were stupid, they had a good sense of smell. They had already learned the technique of stealing birds. They knew the best distance and the fruit landed on the predicted landing spot. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of the bird's big toes stepping on the ground rang out. The person was happy. It's coming. Many times, even if they avoided more birds, the fragrance of the fruit might still attract 2 or 3 birds at once. They still had to spend a lot of effort to steal the birds out. However, this time, there was only one bird that was attracted by the fragrance of the fruit, and no more birds came over. That was even better. It saved them a lot of trouble. Judging from the sound, this bird was quite big. That made them even happier. He hid behind the fence. Because he couldn't see the situation inside, he could only judge by the sound. There was no one else. The patrolling guards didn't come. The bird had already stopped at the place where they threw the fruit. The person holding the straw rope felt the rope in his hand being pulled. He knew that the bird was about to eat, so he quickly pulled the rope out. But when pulling the rope, he had to be skillful. He couldn't be too fast. If he was too fast, the stupid bird wouldn't chase him at night. But if he was too slow, he would be eaten by the stupid bird. Thinking of this, the person was quite proud. One person concentrated on pulling the rope, listening to the sound and judging the behavior of the stupid bird. The other person was breaking the fence. Behind them, there were still people on guard to see if there were any patrolling guards from the Lu tribe. Hurry up! Someone behind urged. The two people who were squatting beside the fence were also anxious. The Lu tribe's guards were already here. The person pulling the rope sped up. After pulling for a while, he stopped. When he felt the rope was struggling, he continued pulling. The other person made a hole in the fence. Because these fences were often broken, the Lu tribe repaired them in a hurry. The trees they used now weren't very good, so the gaps between the logs were bigger. This made it easier for them to break the fences. They cut the ropes connecting the logs, pulled out the logs that could be pulled out, and sawed the ones that couldn't be pulled out. As long as they put something on the saw, the sound of sawing would be reduced a lot. The sound of a big toe stepping on the ground was getting closer. Judging by the sound, I know it's a big guy. The person sawing the log whispered. Actually, if they had more strength, wouldn't it be easier to just carry one out? Unfortunately, they didn't have the strength, so they could only try harder. The person pulling the rope didn't laugh. He always felt that today's bird was a little different from the previous ones. He stretched his neck and looked through the hole in the fence. He vaguely saw a bird's shadow. Although it was a little different from the previous ones, it wasn't as fat, but it shouldn't be a problem. They didn't see the Yanjiao team today. They only saw the tail of the team that had already entered the Lu tribe's territory, so they didn't think of anything else. Hurry up! The person behind them urged again. I know. Prepare the rope. Before the man could finish his sentence, he felt the straw rope in his hand being pulled inwards by a strong force. He was caught off guard and crashed into the fence that had not been pulled out yet, making a loud bang. What's going on? The person next to him who had just finished sawing wood asked. However, just as he finished speaking, a figure suddenly rushed out of the broken fence like a gust of wind. A foot with a big toe stomped down from top to bottom. A scream suddenly sounded. The stupid birds in the animal pen were shocked and gathered in the middle of the pen. After little Jingzi stepped on the man, it didn't give him any time to get up. Its two big feet stepped on him quickly, not giving him a chance to get up at all. This was the principle of taking the initiative and taking the opponent's life. It was always like this when hunting in the forest. Otherwise, how could it hunt down those beasts that were stronger than it? The clouds in the night sky moved, and the moon that was blocked by the wind showed up. The person who was pulled by the rope and bumped into the fence turned his head and saw his companion being stepped under the bird's claws. With the help of the moonlight, he saw the bird coming out of the animal pen. He only felt a chill run from his tailbone to his brain. This wasn't the kind of stupid bird that they usually ate. Its body was obviously similar to those stupid birds, but the two claws in front of him were much sharper and stronger. They were like hooks, and the skin would be torn off if they were hooked. Quick! Someone is stealing stupid birds again? The Lu tribe's patrolman heard the noise and ran over. When the person in the forest saw the situation change, he quickly ran towards the animal pen, wanting to pull his companion out. However, as soon as he ran out of the forest, he saw a big bird jump up in the dark. Its two big claws kicked one of his companions away. As for the other, he fell to the ground and struggled weakly, unable to get up at all. After seeing the situation over there, the person who ran out of the forest stopped and turned to run. The Lu tribe's people were already here, and the two men were injured. He definitely couldn't escape from the Lu tribe's pursuit with the injured. It was better to escape first. Chapter 768. When the patrolling guards rushed over, they only saw two heavily injured people. One of them had been hit by the bird's beak and immediately fell to the ground. They didn't know if he was dead or alive. After repairing the broken fence, the Lu tribesmen looked back a few times before they left. The giant bird that the flaming horns brought over had already returned to its nest. They were worried that this ferocious bird would harm the stupid birds in the animal pen, but now it seemed that not only was it harmless, it was also very beneficial. Didn't they just catch two bird thieves? Perhaps because they knew that the bird thieves had been caught, the other people in the forest didn't make any moves. The next day, the rested Yanjiao warriors walked out of the Lu tribe. The Lu tribesmen had provided them with food, but Xiao Xian and the others had also brought back a lot of meat jerky made from fearsome beast meat. Fearsome beast meat was still the most nutritious. They ate a little bit of all kinds of meat. Only when they were full would they have the strength to move. They didn't start immediately after eating. Xiao Xian had told them about the plan. There would be a waiting period, during which they would adjust their bodies to their best condition. They wouldn't be affected by eating too much. The chief of the Lu tribe, Bai Xing, came out early in the morning. He was waiting to see how the Yanjiao would deal with the people in the forest. Dian Fa and the 1,000 Masks remained in the Lu tribe. They didn't leave because they wanted to wait for the Lu tribesman's final decision. They also wanted to see what the Yanjiao would do next. Xiao Xian stretched his arms and looked up at the sky. Cha-Cha had already scavenged for food and was circling in the air. Xiao Xian whistled. He jumped onto Cha-Cha's back and flew up into the sky. Xiao Xian's field of vision gradually widened. He could see the forest in the distance clearly. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian shouted, "Everyone in the forest, listen up. Other than the Yanjiao tribesmen, all of you must leave before noon. Otherwise, we will kill you." His voice was like the roar of a fearsome beast. It swept through the forest and spread into the distance. In order to let the people inside understand, Xiao Xian shouted in the tribal language and then in the language of the other side of the sea. Gan Xie belonged to Yanjiao now, so Xiao Xian wasn't wrong. His voice traveled far into the distance, and even the echo became weaker. In the forest, the people who heard Xiao Xian's words had different reactions. How arrogant! Which tribe is the Yanjiao tribe? When is noon? Otherwise, I'll kill you? Can they kill us? Ha! At this time, in another part of the forest, Wu He and the others were chatting with old acquaintances on the other side of the sea. When they heard this, they threw away the food in their hands and ran away. Brothers of Chonglu, why are you running? The person who had been bragging to Wu He asked hurriedly when he saw the reaction of Wu He and the others. If we don't run, we'll really die. Wu He whistled. When the long-winged bird arrived, he and his companions flew out of the forest. They wanted to watch the show, but they had to avoid this troublesome place. They had to at least make sure they weren't affected. They didn't want the Yanjiao to misunderstand that they were involved in this matter. Actually, they weren't afraid of the other Yanjiao people. They were only afraid of Xiao Xian, who had shouted just now. They felt pain all over when they heard his voice. They could still remember the slap in the air clearly. Seeing the Chonglis flee as if they had met their natural enemy, the people who had been mercilessly thrown aside by Wu He were dumbfounded. When did the Chonglis become so afraid of trouble? One of them was puzzled. Didn't these Chonglis go wherever there was a show? Boss, what should we do? Another person turned to ask their leader, who was the one who had spoken to Wu He just now. That person lowered his head and thought for a moment. Let's observe the situation first. If the situation doesn't look good, we'll retreat immediately. The Chonglis liked to watch a show, but they were also quick to avoid life-threatening dangers. Wu He's group didn't seem to be faking it. While thinking, that person's brows furrowed slightly. They hadn't been on the mainland for long, so they didn't know much about the Yanjiao tribes. But now they had to take this seriously. They came here to reap benefits, not to throw their lives away. After Xiao Xian shouted, he landed and found a place to rest, leaving the Lu tribesmen to stare at him. You just shouted it out like that? It's fine? An elder of the Lu tribe whispered. Obviously, he didn't agree with this method. There had to be other ways to chase away those people in the forest. At the very least, it would be smarter to be discreet. Sigh, the Yanjiao people were too reckless. Dian Fa also thought that these Yanjiao people were crazy. Did they think that this was Yanjiao territory? How long had those people been in the forest been here? He had already figured out everything in the forest. What about the Yanjiao people? They had just arrived and weren't familiar with the forest at all. One was in the dark while the other was in the light. It was obvious that the Yanjiao people were at a disadvantage. Yanjiao wanted to say something, but he stopped. He wanted to ask Xiao Xian what his plan was. Should they reconsider and change their strategy? But Xiao Xian closed his eyes and rested. The other Yanjiao people didn't seem to have any objections. In the end, he could only sigh. He was still worried. The sun in the sky gradually moved up, and the shadows cast by the people on the ground gradually shortened. Xiao Xian opened his eyes and looked at the sun in the sky. He stood up and called out to the others. Let's go. The Yinjiao people who had been sharpening their swords for a long time were energized. They immediately followed Xiao Xian out of the Lu tribe. At the border, the Lu tribesmen had already pulled open the wooden gate. They watched as the Yinjiao people walked out. They stared at the Yinjiao people who walked past them. They were curious as to whether these people would enter the forest just like that. The moment they stepped out of the Lu tribe's perimeter, the totemic power in Xiao Xian's body surged like boiling water. It roared, and the totemic patterns appeared. Red flames emerged from the totemic patterns. Then, the people around Xiao Xian and behind him also experienced the same change. The second, the third, the fifth, the 10th, 100, similar totemic patterns and flames appeared on their bodies. From afar, it looked like they were about to merge into one. It was as if someone had thrown a piece of firewood into a pot of oil. Flames erupted like a volcano, and their fighting spirit was ignited. A powerful aura suddenly rose and suppressed the surroundings. The fire seed's energy. The Lu shaman looked in that direction with a face full of shock. He had seen a similar scene at the Yanjiao's trading point. But seeing it again, he couldn't help but be shocked. This was the power of the fire seed. Even if the fire seed was no longer there, its energy still existed in the tribesmen. It followed the tribesmen everywhere, ready to start a prairie fire at any time. For Yanjiao, as soon as the word kilt was spoken, Xiao Xian raised his foot and stomped it hard on the ground. There was a loud boom. The ground didn't crack, but it shook. The two large stones the Lu tribesmen placed at the gate of the perimeter wall were shaken off the ground. The Lu and Thousand Masks people who followed behind all felt their feet go numb. The stomping sound was like a war drum, announcing the start of this battle. For Yanjiao, close to 500 warriors roared in unison. Their voices were so loud that it seemed like they were going to overturn everything around them. Their murderous aura was so strong that it made the sun's temperature drop by a few degrees. It made people's hair stand on end. The energy of the Yinjiao fire seed instantly covered the entire area. It was so strong that the Lu tribesmen had the urge to retreat. Some of them even retreated, wanting to get as far away from the Yinjiao people as possible. These Yinjiao people were still eating and laughing together yesterday. But now, these Yinjiao people were in a terrifying state. They were like ferocious beasts with their fangs bared, ready to pounce. Bai Xing looked at the Yinjiao people and felt like he was hallucinating. It wasn't just 500 totemic warriors, but tens of thousands of them. It was as if the entire Yinjiao tribe had gathered here. It was so powerful. The shaman of the Lu tribe widened his eyes. His pupils dilated, and his Adam's apple bobbed up and down. What a strong fire seed. Even the fire seed in their fire pit seemed to be suppressed by it. Even if it was a battle spirit, it shouldn't be like this. The elders beside the Lu shaman gasped. Is it like this after merging with the fire seed? Aren't they only 500 people? Why is there such a strong fire seed energy? Xiao Xian waved his hand and the team split into two groups. They ran in different directions like wolves and tigers. They knew where they were at a disadvantage. They weren't familiar with the terrain, but this wasn't a forest where fearsome beasts lived. They only needed to pay attention to the people hiding in the dark. Since they were in the open, then they had to be more direct. Weren't the people hiding in the forest familiar with the terrain? Weren't they able to hide in the dark? Fine, then let's chase those hiding in the dark out first. The two teams were like two knives on the rotating shaft of a meat grinder. They began to rotate in the forest. The people in the group were like fearsome beasts rushing forward. The ground under their feet trembled under their feet. They didn't seem to want to hide anything. The people in the forest felt the ground tremble closer and closer. Every sound was like a sudden clap of thunder, shocking them to the core. Some people who heard the shout in the morning and didn't leave were already regretting it. Or stay here. Maybe if they avoided the Yinjiao tribe's search, they would be fine? Many people thought so. However, they soon realized that they didn't understand the Yinjiao people. Boom! A tree trunk as thick as 5 people was brutally kicked by a Yinjiao warrior. Half of the tree was kicked away. The tree is down. Let's see where you can hide. Change trees? Go ahead, let's see if you can escape faster or if we can surround you faster. The knives and axes in their hands flashed with cold light under the scattered light in the forest. The sharp edges of the knives and axes cut through the air, drawing a cruel cold light. You damn Yinjiao people! Before the heavy branches fell to the ground, several figures were forced to flee in different directions. Dozens of arrows pierced through the trees, whistling through the air as they chased after them. The warriors with knives, axes, hammers, spears, and other metal weapons followed closely. In this chase and encirclement, the division of labor was clear. One group was responsible for fighting, just like the wolves in the wolf pack who were responsible for chasing and intimidating the deer. The other group was responsible for attacking in the open. There was also a group of people who lowered their presence in the group at the beginning, but were secretly looking for opportunities to take their lives. Imitation was human nature and instinct. The ancestors of the tribesmen imitated the beasts in the forest to hunt. The predators in the forest had all sorts of ways to obtain food, and the tribesmen learned a lot from them. Then they summarized, passed down, and improved. Even now, the Flaming Horn tribe was able to feed the entire tribe with just the things they paid in the Flaming River trading point, the crops in their fields, and the animals in their animal pens. However, they never stopped hunting. Because of this, they were able to maintain their peak condition and fight at their best. Bang, bang. The sound of bowstrings vibrating could be heard. The arrows whistled through the air as they flew towards the forced-out targets. Some of the arrows were meant to chase or block, while others were full of killing intent. The arrows stabbed into the ground, splashing up countless pieces of grass and dust. Ruthlessness flashed in the eyes of the person who was forced out. He stomped his feet and gripped the hilt of his sword tightly. He turned around and slashed with his sword. The next moment, his sword collided with the saber that was shining like a cold star, creating sporadic sparks. At some point, he thought he was going to be sent flying. However, with a clang, the sword in his hand was cut in half. He didn't even have time to react. The knife that broke the sword didn't slow down and quickly slashed across his throat. Even though he reacted quickly and tried his best to dodge, he still couldn't avoid the killing intent of the knife. Blood spurted out from his neck. The man holding the broken sword staggered 2 steps forward, his face still full of shock and fear. Xiao Xian didn't look at that person again and continued forward. The other Yinjiao warriors also followed, the air currents from their movements pushing the people standing there to the ground. The fallen man looked at the bloody figure stepping over him and deeply regretted not leaving when he heard the shout in the morning. If he had left, he wouldn't have died here. His vision gradually darkened. He didn't have time to regret. Before he died, he thought that the other people who stayed in the forest would probably end up like him. If he could do it all over again, he would definitely run away as soon as he heard the words, Yinjiao. No amount of temptation was more important than his life. The blood-stained Yinjiao warriors didn't look at the fallen men, nor did they think about what they were thinking before they died. They continued to clear out the people hiding in the dark in the forest. The smell of blood in the forest became stronger and stronger, carried farther and farther by the wind. The people who thought they were lucky heard the sound getting closer and closer. Even their bones trembled. If they left now, wouldn't it be too late? In the distance, scavenger birds smelled the scent and flew over. On the Lu tribe's side, the people standing on the outer wooden walls listened to the movements in the forest. They looked at the trees that were kicked into the air from time to time, and the muscles at the corners of their mouths twitched. In the past, when the Yinjiao tribe was still in the fearsome beast forest, Yanjiao often brought people with him to deliver baby beasts. However, he had never seen the Yinjiao people in battle. More accurately, he had never seen them in their hunting mode. Too cruel. The current chief of the Lu tribe, Bai Xing, looked over in a daze. An indescribable complex feeling arose in his mind. The shaman of the Lu tribe smelled the scent of blood carried by the wind and thought of the records left behind by their ancestors about the Yanjiao people. The Yanjiao people, no matter if it was 1,000 years ago or 1,000 years later, always liked to use similar methods. Simple and violent. Chapter 769. The forest flashed with cold light. The sounds of metal, people, branches breaking, and arrows flying through the air were mixed in with the smell of blood and carnage. Xiao Xian raised his hand to wipe off the blood that splashed on his face and continued to walk forward. Suddenly, Xiao Xian stopped in his tracks and the team slowed down. Xiao Xian saw Gan Jie standing beside a tree not far away. On their way here, they had seen a few people lying dead on the ground. Judging by the wounds on their bodies, it was easy to tell who killed them. Most of them had been killed with their bare hands, and the method was similar. There were also bits and pieces of gray linen in the surrounding bushes. Gan Jie had many wounds on his body. If he was a normal person, he would have died many times over. However, Gan Jie was still moving like a normal person. There was no pain on his face. When he saw Xiao Xian and the rest, he even greeted them calmly. He must have gained a lot from last night. Xiao Xian thought to himself. Xiao Xian didn't stay here for long. He signaled the others to follow him and continued to sweep forward. The two teams moved in two different directions. Like the blades on the rotating shaft of a meat grinder, they cleaned up the forest around the Lu tribe from the inside to the outside. Gan Jie wouldn't join them. After all, this operation focused on teamwork. Gan Jie couldn't adapt to Yan Jiao's operation. He didn't want to join them either. It seemed like he had another target. Moreover, from the looks of it, Gan Jie was heading towards his target. Xiao Xian didn't need to call him along. After Xiao Xian and the rest left, Gan Jie looked up at Yang Guang. At this time, the Yang Guang was not as strong as before. It was closer to dusk. Gan Jie's cloak was mostly destroyed, and it hung on his body in tatters. Gan Jie didn't mind it at all. He sniffed the air, and he could tell that there was a faint scent of blood in the air. The source of the scent was the target he was looking for. Gan Jie didn't know why he could accurately identify the smell he was looking for. Perhaps the changes in his organs caused a change in his sense of smell. Moreover, the way he identified the smell of blood wasn't from the wind. It was from another smell in the blood that didn't spread with the wind. Perhaps it was a unique smell in the blood of people who had merged with the fire seed. It was different from that of normal beasts. Even though the people were downwind and the wind carried away the smell, Gan Jie could still tell. After waking up from his long sleep, he was extremely sensitive to the smell of blood. There were no bloodstains on the ground. They covered it well. They also took into consideration the direction of the wind, but it still couldn't escape Gan Jie's nose. Perhaps they didn't know that other than the smell of blood, there was another smell in their blood that couldn't be affected by the wind. Behind a bush as tall as a person clutched his abdomen. He breathed carefully and looked around nervously. His eyes were full of fear. He was at his limit. Fortunately, they were quite far from the Lu tribe. The Yanjiao team shouldn't be here. They had been active in the area around the Lu tribe for a long time. They were familiar with the area. They escaped quickly and left the people behind them behind. Did they escape death? His heart was filled with apprehension and regret. He didn't expect the 5 of them to lose so badly against one person last night. He couldn't help but tremble at the thought of that person. No, that person wasn't human. He definitely wasn't human. Otherwise, why couldn't they kill him? Luckily, he escaped quickly. Otherwise, he would have died like his 4 companions. As he was thinking, he suddenly heard rustling sounds approaching. It sounded like someone was running on the grass. Who was it? He didn't want to run. He felt that the temporary hiding place he had found was pretty good. As long as he continued to hide, he would be fine. Therefore, he only turned his head to look through the narrow gaps between the branches and leaves of the bushes to see who was coming. A figure covered in green appeared in his vision. He was so shocked that he almost stopped breathing. His blood seemed to freeze. How did this person catch up? He thought, but his body was a step too late. An arm came straight at him like a spear. The next moment, he felt like his jaw was hit by a hammer. His whole body was lifted high into the air. His face contorted from the pain and broken bones. After landing heavily on the ground, he wanted to speak. He wanted to answer the question that they had ignored and didn't answer. He wanted this person to let him go, but the bones in his jaw were severely fractured. It was difficult for him to even open his mouth, let alone say a clear and complete sentence. Looking at the person walking over step by step, he used his arm to support himself. He wanted to run away again, but this time, he didn't have the chance. A hand pressed down on his head, forcing him back to the ground again. Bam! His head hit the ground, causing grass and mud to splatter in all directions. He was already seriously injured, so he couldn't withstand the impact. His mind was in a mess. Crack! There was the sound of bones breaking. The person on the ground stopped breathing. Gon Xie retracted his hand from the person's head. When he got up, he was still confused. Why did these people look down on tribesmen? It had nothing to do with their strength. After all, these people weren't that strong. Gon Xie didn't understand. Why did these people feel so superior when they no longer lived as tribesmen? Although these people didn't answer Gon Xie's question directly, their reactions and words were filled with disdain. It wasn't just these 5 people. There were others too. These people from the other side of the sea made Gon Xie unhappy when they talked about tribesmen. When he was in a bad mood, he didn't hold back. Weren't these people tribesmen too? Even if their way of life had changed, they shouldn't be so disdainful. Did the fire seed change, or did the people change? Gon Xie maintained his posture and started to think. No, the fire seed was still the fire seed. It was just that the people had changed. Just like himself. Gon Xie rubbed his fingers. The blood on his hand was still warm. It was much warmer than the blood on his body. That was because Gon Xie didn't have any body temperature. Gon Xie didn't look at the person on the ground. He glanced at the trees in front of him. He wanted to walk over, but after looking at the sky, he turned and walked back to the Lu tribe. He was hungry. When he saw the blood, he felt hungry. He even wondered if he should use the man's blood to alleviate his hunger. However, this was just a thought. He didn't actually do it. He wasn't interested in drinking human blood for now. After Gon Xie left, a few figures walked out from the bushes in the direction he was looking at. Their faces were pale and they were frightened. They came from a mid-sized tribe in the central region. After merging with the fire seed, the people in the tribe were like wild horses out of control. All kinds of thoughts started to form in their minds. After hearing about the Lu tribe's situation, they came over to take advantage of the situation. Who knew that they would almost lose their lives before they could take advantage of the situation? They didn't come out when Xiao Xian shouted in the morning. They only came out when they heard the Flaming Horn tribe's frightening movements. They thought they had already left the warning area, but when they heard the commotion, they decided to come over and take a look. They thought they might be able to pick up some treasures, but who knew they would meet such a terrifying person? They believed that the person they were looking for must have noticed them. He just didn't care about them for some reason. At this moment, they felt extremely lucky. When dusk fell, the 2 teams of Yanjiao walked out of the forest covered in blood. They had been killing non-stop for half a day. They were exhausted physically and mentally. Their nerves were also tense. They were in their peak state when they were hunting in the forest. They felt like they were on fire. Even though it was over, they still couldn't calm down. However, even though they were still excited, their bodies were still exhausted. Even if their bodies were made of iron, they would still get tired. They weren't Gon Xie, so they were about the same. But even if they were tired, they couldn't stop the strong murderous aura and the smell of blood from their bodies. Every pore on their bodies exuded a strong murderous aura. It made them look like ferocious beasts. Anyone who looked at them would feel a chill run down their spine. Even people who were used to seeing blood and death couldn't help but avoid them at this moment. When the Lu tribesmen saw the Yanjiao people coming over, they immediately opened up a path. They were nervous when they were more than 5 steps away from the team. After coming out of the forest, the people in the team felt much more relaxed. They even put their arms around each other's shoulders and laughed. It was just like when they were returning from a hunt. The injured had already been sent to the Lu tribe for treatment. They brought their own medicine. The medicine in the Lu tribe wasn't any better than the Yanjiao medicine. Bai Xing was just about to go up and say something to Xiao Xian when his gaze swept past the Yanjiao team. He looked at the back of the team and asked, "Hey, who's that?" Xiao Xian turned his head and smiled. "It's Gon Xie, the one who was with us before." He was wearing a cloak. The Lu tribesmen were shocked. Was this the person who was stabbed with a sword but was fine? Yesterday, Gan Xie was wearing a cloak and a hood so they couldn't see his face clearly. Also, he wasn't here last night so they didn't know what he looked like. Now that he wasn't wearing a cloak, they could see his face clearly. But after they saw him clearly, they were even more shocked. Gan Xie's original appearance was only slightly greener than a normal person's. There wasn't anything special about him. But now, when Gan Xie came out of the forest, the wounds on his body were exposed to everyone. Gan Xie didn't look strong. At least compared to the Yanjiao people, Gan Xie looked thin and weak. His cloak was tattered from the fight in the forest and it couldn't cover the wounds on his body. At this moment, there were countless wounds on Gan Xie's body. His chest, back, limbs, neck, and even his face were all healed. Some of the wounds were only scars left. They were of different lengths and densely packed together. It was a shocking sight. Some people were impressed. Gan Xie was indeed a brave warrior with such terrifying injuries. It wasn't hard to imagine the danger he faced in the forest. But there were also some people who saw something else. Because they saw it, they were even more shocked. They looked at Gan Xie with respect and fear. More than half of those wounds would have been life-threatening if they were on a normal person. It would be a miracle if they were still alive. But there were also some wounds that were truly fatal. For example, the most obvious ones were around his heart, neck, and other places. Just by looking at the wounds, one could roughly estimate the depth of the wounds. Cuts, stabs, and other wounds would have been fatal if they were on a normal person. But Gan Xie was just like yesterday. He was completely fine. His face was calm and he didn't look like he was injured at all. Dian Nefei looked at Gan Xie in shock. This person was even more dangerous than the Yanjiao people. Where did the Yanjiao people find someone like him? Why did he join the Yanjiao people? Elder Shao Xian, the people in the forest? Bai Xing asked. There shouldn't be any problems around here. Unless someone is hiding and hasn't been found by us. Shao Xian looked around the forest. Flocks of scavenger birds were already moving around in the forest. Thank you, Bai Xing said solemnly. The promised reward will be sent tomorrow. Since it was a deal, he had to take what he had to take. Shao Xian thought of something and said, "We'll leave once you're done dividing the reared beasts." Hearing this, Bai Xing paused in his actions and remained silent. We've already done what we have to do. We won't stay here forever. We won't interfere with your decisions. But if you want to move and merge your fire seed, these 2 days are the best time to do so. The threats around them had been dealt with. Those who had gone into hiding wouldn't come back anytime soon. This was a good opportunity. If they missed it, they wouldn't have another chance. They couldn't have too many distractions when merging their fire seed. I understand. Bai Xing gritted his teeth. He had already made up his mind. Seeing Bai Xing leave with heavy but determined steps, Guang Yi asked Shao Xian, "Can the Lu tribesmen merge their fire seed?" But I don't know where they'll move to. They won't stay here any longer, Shao Xian deduced from what he heard from the Lu tribesmen. The Thousand Masks tribe was still waiting. This meant that the Lu tribesmen didn't have a consensus. This isn't good. Guang Yi frowned. He didn't like this attitude of the Lu tribesmen and didn't expect them to move to the Flaming River region. Then we'll have to see how they perform. After this incident, if they still couldn't find the root of the problem, the Lu tribe might be able to get through this, but they might not be able to survive the next time, even if they merged their fire seed. After checking on the injured again, Shao Xian assigned them to take turns to keep watch. Then he asked Guang to bring the forest raccoons back to the animal pens. Although they had cleared out a group of people in the forest, they couldn't be sure if anyone else would dare to come and steal the birds. That night, the Yanjiao people slept well. However, the Thousand Masks and Lu tribesmen suffered from insomnia. Chapter 770. The next day, the Lu tribesmen still hadn't finished counting the animals in their animal pens, so Bai Xing went to look for Shao Xian. We've decided to merge our fire seed, and after that, we'll be moving to the Flaming River. We hope that Elder Shao Xian and the rest of you can help us on this journey. Bai Xing didn't sleep the entire night, so he didn't look well. However, his eyes were bright and he sounded relaxed as he spoke. They finally made a decision on such a huge matter. Shao Xian looked at the new chief of the Lu tribe. He didn't mind when the reared beasts would be given to him. If the Lu tribe decided to move to the Flaming River region, they wouldn't have to give him the reared beasts now. After everything had settled down and the reared beasts had recovered, it wouldn't be too late to send them to the Flaming Horns. However, Xiao Xian still had a question. Where have you decided to move to? The Flaming River region isn't small, Xiao Xian asked. Well, we've already decided on the location a long time ago, Bai Xing smiled. The chief brought us there during the Flaming River Trading Point's grand banquet. The chief Bai Xing was referring to was the previous chief who had passed away. Although that chief wasn't the strongest in the tribe, he was smart and had foresight. When he was invited to the Flaming River Trading Point, he brought a few warriors to explore the area. He even drew a map and made markings on it. The Lu tribe's water source was almost depleted. Although they could still survive, a lack of water severely affected the quality of their animals. Back then, when the previous chief went to the Flaming River Trading Point, he had already considered moving there. After he came back, he went to a few other places and listed them as options. Now, Bai Xing had chosen the Flaming River Trading Point. Xiao Xian looked at the animal skin scroll Bai Xing took out. On it was a map of the Flaming River Trading Point with a few simple strokes. It marked out the Flaming River Trading Point's location, the Rain Tribe, Drumming Tribe, and other tribes. The place the Lu tribesmen chose was upstream of the Rain Tribe. It wasn't too close to the Flaming River, but it wasn't too far either. Most importantly, there was a small river that led to the Flaming River. Xiao Xian knew this river because he had walked upstream. This river must have appeared during the disaster and didn't exist before. It was only about 10 meters wide and less than 20 meters wide, but it was enough for the Lu tribesmen. Plus, it was connected to the Flaming River, so it wouldn't dry up easily. Even if they ran out of water, they could walk further to the Flaming River to get more water. Even worse, if there was a bigger problem, they could choose to move. After merging their fire seed, they wouldn't have to worry about it. When are you merging? Asked Xiao Xian. Tomorrow, the day after tomorrow at the latest, said Bai Xing. The Lu shaman asked Xiao Xian for advice about merging their fire seed. Although they had gained a lot of experience from merging their fire seed, they still had to be careful when it came to their fire seed. In the end, the Lu tribe chose to merge their fire seed on the afternoon of the third day after clearing the forest. They didn't dare to do it at night because the animals in their animal pens would be frightened. They were braver during the day, so they were safer. Dien Fa had already left with the Thousand Masks tribe the day before. No one knew what they were planning in the future. Perhaps they would imitate the slave masters on the other side of the sea and merge with other smaller tribes to form their own political system. No matter what, they had to go through a bloody and cruel cleansing process. After all, the situation there wasn't like the Flaming River region. The Thousand Masks tribe was surrounded by tribes that had once established themselves in the central region. Every tribe had their own ambitions. If they weren't careful, the Thousand Masks tribe could be bitten back. Back in the day, the Ji family in the royal city fought with a few other tribes for the top position. It was also a bloodbath. However, that was the Thousand Masks tribe's business. Xiao Xian didn't think about it anymore. He stood with the other Yanjiao tribesmen outside the Lu tribe's boundary. During the merging process, the Lu tribe's fire seed energy would affect the Yanjiao tribesmen. The conflict between different fire seeds would bring pressure. This was the Lu tribe's territory. During the merging process, the fire seed energy would be released completely. The Yanjiao tribesmen didn't want to get hurt. The aura of the Lu tribe's fire seed was getting stronger and stronger. The people standing outside the walls could clearly feel the pressure from the foreign tribe's fire seed. It was rare for Gan Xie to experience something like this, so he looked at the Lu tribe curiously. Is this the merging process? It's just part of the process. We need to ignite the fire seed in the fire pit. This is just the beginning. The fire seed energy will get stronger and stronger, Xiao Xian explained. Gan Xie had a familiar feeling. It wasn't the Lu tribe's fire seed energy, but the process of merging with the fire seed. Although he wasn't a Lu tribesman, he could feel the current state of the Lu tribe's fire seed. It was very similar to the scene in his memory. Back then, they encountered a similar situation. Unfortunately, after the fire seed was ignited, the shaman limited it to only 10 of them. Including the shaman, there were 11 people in total. 11 people merged with the fire seed of the entire Han tribe. If it wasn't for the fact that the fire seed was weakened during the battle, the 11 of them would have died on the spot. Back then, the shaman of the Han tribe didn't expect that to happen either. When he realized that things were out of control, he couldn't do anything about it. He couldn't do anything about it and could only let it happen. Even now, no one could recreate what happened to the Han tribe. It was just an accident that no one knew about. Even if the shaman of the Han tribe was still alive, he couldn't recreate it. When the khaki-colored fire seed flames shot up into the sky, the energy of the fire seed reached its peak. The majestic energy brought great pressure to the Yanjiao people standing outside. The Lu tribe was like the eye of a storm, with strong winds blowing outwards. Guang Yi couldn't help but take a few steps back. He wanted to get as far away from the fire seed as possible. When he looked up, he saw Xiao Xian standing there calmly as if nothing had happened. He thought for a moment, then took a step back and stood behind Xiao Xian. Instantly, he felt the pressure lessen. It was as if the impact of the Lu tribe's fire seed was blocked by Xiao Xian. When the others saw Guang Yi doing this, they followed suit. 1, 2, 10, 100. When Xiao Xian looked behind him, the scattered Yanjiao people had formed a triangular formation. Xiao Xian was at the front of the triangle facing the Lu tribe. Gan Jie didn't stand behind Xiao Xian like the others. Although he was also affected by the Lu tribe's fire seed, this feeling was hard to describe. If it was a normal person, they would definitely say that it was like they couldn't breathe. Gan Jie didn't need to breathe anymore, but this feeling was similar. However, while the Yanjiao people wanted him to relax, Gan Jie didn't want to. He wanted to experience the changes more clearly because all of this matched up with the scenes in his memory. It really is fusion. Gan Jie closed his eyes. Back then, the shaman of the Han tribe almost let his injuries worsen. It was equivalent to suicide. If they had known this would happen, perhaps the shamaness wouldn't have blamed herself so much. No, she still blamed herself. After all, it was the shamaness who turned the tribe's fire seed into such a state. Moreover, she only merged it into 11 people's bodies. The rest of the Han tribesmen were no different from the wanderers who had no totemic power. No matter what, it was all in the past. What happened couldn't be undone. There was no point in regretting it. When everything calmed down, the Lu tribe's fire seed's aura gradually dissipated. The Yanjiao people also felt the pressure on their bodies disappear. It's done. The Lu tribesmen had successfully merged their fire seed. Every tribe that succeeded in merging their fire seed would have some time to adjust their mentality. Everyone had different thoughts. After all, from now on, they were no longer the Lu tribe of the past. If they encountered danger, they wouldn't be able to avoid it by hiding in the tribe. They wouldn't have the fire seed to protect them anymore. However, Xiao Xian and the others wouldn't give the Lu tribe too much time to adjust. They couldn't just sit here and wait for the Lu tribe to adapt to this change. The Lu tribe still had to migrate. If they wanted to travel with the Yanjiao people, they had to hurry up and prepare. The animals in the animal pens were counted and assigned to different people. When the time came, there would be people to watch the animals along the way to prevent them from leaving the herd. Fortunately, after generations of domestication, the animals had become much more docile. They weren't as wild as the wild beasts in the forest. There were even some animals like cows and horses that were used to pull carts. When the time came, as long as they took good care of them, they would be able to manage the herd. The animals in the Lu tribe were all social animals. Wherever the herd went, they would follow. The Lu tribe was busy for 3 days. The Yanjiao people also helped them build carts. The people who hadn't awakened their totemic power and the injured were arranged to sit on the wooden carts. When everything was ready, the Lu tribesmen set a fire and burned down all the houses in the tribe. The houses and other tools that they couldn't take away were gone. Without the ancient fire seed, as soon as they left, someone would come and take it. They wouldn't leave it to those who were still watching in the dark. Since they couldn't take it away, they might as well destroy it. When everything was destroyed in the fire, the Lu tribe drove the herd away and began to migrate. There were people sitting on the stupid birds in front of the herd. Sometimes, some injured Yanjiao warriors would ride on them. Because these birds were too stupid, they wouldn't think of anything else when they saw food. So, if you wanted these stupid birds to follow you, you just had to use food to keep them. Thus, such a scene was often seen on the road. A clumsy bird was striding with its 2 big feet, and the person riding on it was holding a long pole, with a piece of wild fruit tied to the other end of the pole, hanging in front of them. The cows and other herds of animals were also divided into several groups. There were people riding horses and cows around the herds. They ran back and forth, chasing the animals that strayed away from the herd back to the herd. When other tribes migrated, there were only people. However, when the Lu tribe migrated, it was even bigger. The running hooves of the animals kicked up clouds of dust. It was fine in places with a lot of grass, but in places with sparse vegetation and people walking around, the clouds of dust were so thick that people couldn't even see them clearly. The Lu tribe's migration route was different from the Yanjiao's. Sometimes, they would take longer detours for safety reasons. Xiao Xian sent letters to the major tribes in the central region in advance, telling them to take care of their subordinates. This gave the major tribes a headache, especially the Thousand Masks tribe. When they saw Xiao Xian's letter, Dian Fa cursed the Yanjiao ancestors in his heart. The Lu tribe chose to follow the Yanjiao and the Thousand Masks tribe couldn't stop them. But now, the Lu tribe's migration team might be attacked by other tribes. What did this have to do with the Thousand Masks tribe? Even if some of the other tribes relied on the Thousand Masks tribe, that was their own decision. Why should the Thousand Masks tribe stop them? Dian Fa had hoped that the Lu tribe would encounter more trouble during their migration. That way, they would regret following the Yanjiao. But now, the letter said that if any of the Thousand Masks tribe's subordinates attacked the migration team, the Thousand Masks tribe would be held responsible. How unreasonable! However, because of the merging of the Fire Seed, the Thousand Masks tribe had signed a treaty with the Flaming Horn tribe at the Flaming River trading point. Now that Xiao Xian mentioned this in his letter, even if the Thousand Masks tribe was unhappy, they had to endure it. The chief of the Thousand Masks tribe closed his eyes and didn't speak. In the end, he took a deep breath and said in a low voice, "Tell the other tribes not to attack the Lu tribe's migration team. If anyone dares to attack them, they will be kicked out of Thousand Masks territory." If the Yanjiao people made the Thousand Masks tribe suffer, the Thousand Masks tribe could only vent their anger on others. Dian Fa's lips moved. No one knew what he was saying, but he still turned around and followed the chief's orders to pass the message to the Thousand Masks tribe's subordinates. Not only the Thousand Masks tribe, but other tribes, such as the Mang tribe and the Eight Limbs tribe, also warned their subordinates after receiving Xiao Xian's letter. Therefore, although the migration team of the Lu tribe also encountered some trouble, it was not much. At least, it was less than they expected. At first, Yanjiao thought it was strange. Why did the people they met along the way not come over to snatch the beasts when they saw them? During their break, he chatted with the Yanjiao people and found out that Xiao Xian had sent letters to the other tribes. The elders of the Lu tribe who were against following the Yanjiao people were shocked when they heard about this. They didn't expect things to turn out this way. After all, these tribes were all big tribes in the central region. How could they restrict the movements of other tribes just because of Xiao Xian's letter? Gong Xie ran at a constant speed. Some of the Lu tribesmen told him to rest on the back of a dumb bird if he was tired, but the moment Gong Xie got on the back of a bird, the dumb birds would crouch down and curl up into a ball. They wouldn't run away unless Gong Xie left. They were afraid. Gong Xie didn't mind. He didn't get tired easily. As he ran, Gong Xie, who was wearing a new cloak, suddenly raised his head and looked in a certain direction. His expressionless face twitched. Chapter 771. After the Lu tribe's migration team left the central region, the number of people they encountered gradually decreased. Originally, the people of the Lu tribe thought that they would encounter more obstacles when they were in the central region. But who would have thought that the places they passed through would be less troublesome? Although they did encounter a lot of small troubles along the way, such as being attacked by some people who were not from the central region, they passed through smoothly. However, after leaving the central region, when the tribes were not so densely distributed, they might encounter more troubles. In the central region, There were many people and many eyes. Perhaps some people wanted to hide their identities and attack the Lu tribesmen, but there were too many people in the central region. If they were accidentally discovered by others and recognized the person in the dark, then the person who attacked them would be unlucky. But when there were fewer people, no one would be able to see what they were doing. Even if the Lu tribesmen wanted to find help, they couldn't. Therefore, after leaving the central region, they had to be more vigilant. At night, the team gathered to rest. Xiao Xian had a bad feeling. After thinking for a while, he took out a straw rope and began to perform divination. The Yanjiao people were surprised to see Xiao Xian like this. Xiao Xian wouldn't use this method for small matters. It wasn't good to rely on it too much. What if the divination didn't work in the future? How could they survive? That was why, as long as it was something that could be easily solved, Xiao Xian would not use divination. The Yanjiao people also knew this. Because of this, they were curious why Xiao Xian was performing divination again. Did he have a premonition? After the knot was successfully tied, Xiao Xian frowned and pondered. The others didn't ask. Xiao Xian would naturally tell them when he figured it out. However, they were still curious about what Xiao Xian had divined. It didn't look good. Could it be that someone wanted to rob them? The divination didn't look good either. Xiao Xian looked in a direction. It was the direction of the desert. The premonition he had was related to the desert. Not divination couldn't accurately predict what was going to happen. There were too many variables. Xiao Xian couldn't predict what was going to happen, but he was sure that there was danger coming from that direction. The target was clear too. As he thought about it, Xiao Xian looked in Gan Xie's direction. This time, the target wasn't the Lu tribe or the Yanjiao people. It was Gan Xie. The sun couldn't be seen now. There was only a little light from the clouds. Gan Xie didn't wear his hood, revealing his bald head. Xiao Xian didn't think that Gan Xie's actions. Guang Yi, you and Xiang Chen will leave with the team tomorrow, said Xiao Xian to Guang Yi, who was resting. Guang Yi frowned deeply. Something's going to happen? They're not targeting the Lu tribe. Xiao Xian pointed in the direction of the desert. There might be people coming from there. You guys leave first. Guang Yi couldn't see faces, but he had a good sense of direction. He could tell where Xiao Xian was pointing. He wanted to ask them to stay and help, but he remembered the undead monsters in the desert. He paused and asked, "Just you? Don't you need more people to stay here?" "He'll definitely stay." Xiao Xian tilted his head in Gan Xie's direction. Their target might be Gan Xie? Those people's target was Gan Xie and not Xiao Xian. Guang Yi was relieved. From his perspective, Gan Xie wasn't a member of his tribe. He didn't care if anything happened to him. Xiao Xian, on the other hand, could run if he couldn't win. Cha-Cha could follow him. It was much easier to fly in the air. It would be more inconvenient to leave more people behind. Since Xiao Xian had already made his decision, it must have been a decision after careful consideration. Guang Yi did not say anything else. The next day, after a night of rest, the team set off again. This time, Guang Yi and Xiang Chen were in the lead. They would bring their people and travel with the Lu tribe to the Flaming River. With them around, Xiao Xian wouldn't have to worry. Many people in the Lu tribe were confused when they saw Xiao Xian and Gan Xie staying behind. However, the Yanjiao didn't say anything. They didn't ask any further questions. The only thing they knew was that Xiao Xian stayed behind to stop some trouble. The cries of the reared beasts gradually faded into the distance. The team could no longer be seen. Xiao Xian found a tree nearby and sat down to rest, waiting for the people to arrive. Those people must have a way to track them. When Robber 11 went to the secret underground room in the Flaming River Castle, he brought along special tracking insects. The people from Rock Hill City had many tricks up their sleeves, so they must have a way to find their targets. This place was surrounded by forests. They weren't dense and the trees weren't very big. Perhaps it was because there were occasional people here, but there weren't any thick, ancient trees. There were mountains nearby. They weren't tall and were considered big in this area. However, they couldn't be compared to the forests where fearsome beasts lived. The surroundings were green and there was still some dew on the grass in the morning. Xiao Xian rested on the tree and waited. As long as they didn't move, those people would definitely find them. Even if they didn't arrive today, they would definitely arrive tomorrow. The Yinjiao and Lu tribes' teams were already far away. No matter how big the commotion here was, it wouldn't affect them. Gan Xie sat on a large rock under the shade of a tree. A long time ago, a team used to rest here. There were some drawings carved on the rock with hard tools, but they were already blurred so he couldn't tell what was written. The hood covered most of Gan Xie's face, so his eyes couldn't be seen clearly. He just stared in one direction for a long time. He didn't even blink once. He was like a stone statue, maintaining the same posture without moving. This wasn't something a normal person could do. The sun hung high in the sky and set. The clouds in the sky were burning and the ground seemed to be covered in a layer of red. An eagle screeched in the sky. Xiao Xian stood up and looked in a certain direction. They're here. Not long after, four flying birds appeared in the distant sky. When the figures in the air flew closer, Xiao Xian also recognized these birds. They were the species domesticated by the desert slave masters, a type of eagle that lived in the desert. Compared to eagles in other places, their claws were larger in proportion to their bodies. Every toe was longer and harder. When they found prey in the desert, even if the prey burrowed into the sand, they could dive down and dig their long, sharp claws into the sand to fish out the prey. Many desert snakes, scorpions, and lizards were the prey of these desert eagles. There weren't many people coming. Of the 4 eagles, 3 had one person standing on them. The leading eagle had 2 people on its back. There were 5 people in total. Xiao Xian became even more cautious. The fewer people there were, the harder it would be to deal with them. Xiao Xian recognized the 2 people on the leading desert eagle. It was Su Lu, whom he had met in the desert, and the cloaked man who controlled the puppets beside Su Lu. There was only one person on each of the other 3 eagles. Su Lu and the person beside him were sprawled on the eagle's back. The other 3 were standing, and they stood very steadily. They were dressed like the strange puppets, but Xiao Xian knew that these 3 people were different from the puppets he encountered in the desert. Before the 3 desert eagles landed, the 3 people had already jumped off their backs and fell. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of 3 people landing on the ground shook the ground. It was like the muffled sound of boulders crashing onto the ground. There was a thick layer of grass on the ground, so there wasn't a lot of dust. After the 3 people landed, they didn't move. Instead, they stood in the crater. Because their faces were covered with cloth, Xiao Xian couldn't see what they looked like. However, through his special vision, he could see that their bones were brighter than normal people's. They didn't breathe, nor did they have a heartbeat. They didn't even pant after landing. They were like lifeless pieces of wood. Puppets. They were special puppets. Xiao Xian looked at Gan Xie. These 3 people were very similar to Gan Xie. Perhaps they were Gan Xie's clansmen who had been turned into puppets. Unlike Gan Xie, these 3 people had traces of red energy flowing through their bones. This was the energy source that controlled their movements. It was also the power of the fire seed that had been implanted into their bodies. Someone had implanted the power of the fire seed into their bones to control them. The person beside Su Lu couldn't have done this. Otherwise, Gan Xie would have been turned into a puppet long ago. However, Xiao Xian didn't sense anyone else around. Where was the person controlling these 3 people? Or did they not need someone to control them? Xiao Xian's heart skipped a beat. The puppets he had seen in the desert could only be considered high-level puppets. However, these 3 people might be even more special. As Xiao Xian pondered, the eagle that Su Lu and the person beside him were on had landed. They weren't like the 3 puppets who couldn't even feel pain. They wouldn't fall from the sky. Instead, they waited for the desert eagle to stabilize itself before coming down. After Su Lu steadied himself, he looked around. His gaze lingered on Gan Xie, who was sitting on a large rock. Then he looked at Xiao Xian, who had already come down from the tree. Yanjiao, Xiao Xian. Su Lu shouted angrily. Su Lu was so angry that his liver hurt when he recalled Su Gu's gloating expression after he had abandoned his armor and escaped with his body covered in wounds. The Lia City King was very disappointed in him. He had also thought of finding the ancient corpse. He didn't hesitate to use his treasures to contact the thief and ask him to go to the Yinjiao tribe to find the lost ancient corpse. Unfortunately, there was no news of the thief. The thief said that he was already dead. Fortunately, he still had one more chance. As long as he brought back the lost ancient corpse, he still had a chance to compete with Su Gu. Su Li's eyes were filled with murderous intent when he thought of the culprit who had caused all this. However, when he thought of Xiao Xian's strength, he became wary. Fortunately, he didn't have to fight this time. Otherwise, even 10 of him wouldn't be a match for Xiao Xian. Chu Su. Su Lu looked at the person standing beside him. The person wearing a yellow sackcloth cloak didn't pay attention to Su Lu. His gaze was fixed on Ganqie. Before he landed, he knew that the person sitting there was the person he was looking for. However, he couldn't help but feel that something was wrong. He looked at the exposed half of the person's face and the pair of pale hands. His heart skipped a beat. He looked at Xiao Xian abruptly and asked, "What did you do?" Xiao Xian smiled and didn't say anything. Chu Su's cloak was still covered in sand. The wind that blew against him still carried the smell of the desert. It didn't fit in with the surrounding atmosphere. Chu Su looked at the person who was sitting on the rock and wearing a cloak. The gray and rough sackcloth was fluttering in the wind. He was also wearing a cloak, but compared to the 3 people they brought with them, he looked more like a normal person. If it weren't for the fact that the person wasn't breathing and that the tracking device in his hand was pointing in the same direction, he would have doubted his own judgment. What did the Yanjiao people do with the ancient corpse? Why would there be such a huge change? Why are you asking so many questions? Su Lu became impatient when Chu Su didn't move. Xiao Xian, hand the ancient corpse over to us and we'll let you go this time. With 3 powerful helpers by his side, Su Lu was confident in his words. Xiao Xian chuckled. Xiao Xian's nonchalant attitude infuriated Su Lu. Xiao Xian's gaze and tone were obviously looking down on him. Su Lu recalled that he had suffered a few losses at the hands of Xiao Xian. He took a deep breath and said, "Cut the crap. Just kill him." The last sentence was directed at Chu Su. As long as they killed Xiao Xian, they would be able to take the ancient corpse away. Originally, he didn't want to fight Xiao Xian here. If he accidentally lost his life, it wouldn't be worth it. However, with Xiao Xian's attitude, Su Lu didn't want to give up so easily. His father, the Liya King, had said that these 3 puppets were different from ordinary puppets. Perhaps they wouldn't have a problem facing Xiao Xian's strange flaming blade? Su Li's expression turned cold when he thought of this. Chu Su, what are you waiting for? Do it. The cloaked man beside him still ignored Su Lu because he noticed that the cloaked man had glanced at him. Under the shadow of the cloaked man's hood, there was a pair of eyes looking back at him. Chu Su suppressed the strange feeling in his heart and said to Xiao Xian again, "Ask him to come here. We want to bring him back to Rock Hill City." Xiao Xian didn't move. "I don't care. Why don't you talk to him personally and see what he thinks? If he wants to go, I won't stop him." What did he mean? Su Lu and Chu Su were puzzled. Then, they heard the person sitting on the rock say, "Who are you?" His tone was cold and emotionless. He spoke. Su Lu felt his scalp go numb and his back felt like it was stuffed with ice. "Isn't this an ancient corpse? How can it speak?" Chu Su was horrified. The Yanjiao people had brought an ancient corpse out. Judging by the looks of it, he guessed that the Yanjiao people had used some means to turn the ancient corpse into something like a puppet. However, a puppet couldn't speak on its own because it was inanimate. But what was this person sitting on the rock not far away from them? He had placed the ancient corpse under the beast carriage for a long time. He should have been familiar with it. But why did it feel like a complete stranger? He must have been controlled by the Yanjiao people. Chu Su, do it. Su Li's voice was sharp and piercing due to his extreme shock. This time, Chu Su didn't wait any longer. If they wanted to know what had happened to the ancient corpse, they would know with a single look. "Do it," Chu Su shouted. As soon as Chu Su's voice fell, the 3 cloaked men standing in the pit charged towards Ganqie like arrows released from a bow. Feeling the hostility, Ganqie felt an indescribable sense of loss. His entire body tensed up. His body, which had no temperature to begin with, seemed to be emitting cold air. The temperature around him seemed to be dropping as well. They were his tribesmen. Ganqie had already sensed them before they had even appeared. Now, he could feel the murderous aura emanating from the 3 tribesmen. Their target was him. Chapter 772. 3 against 1? Xiao Xian wondered if he should help, but Gan Xie didn't seem like he wanted him to. Xiao Xian decided to observe the situation first. After all, this was a battle between the Han tribesmen. Gan Xie's excitement when he first saw these 3 tribesmen was now replaced by intense disappointment. Although he was mentally prepared, he still felt disappointed when he saw them in person. A greenish-black fist quickly enlarged in Gan Xie's eyes. In the blink of an eye, it was already in front of him. A strong murderous intent radiated from his opponent's arm. He raised his arm as if he had gathered all his strength into a spear. He didn't say anything, but his intention was clear. Kill. His opponent's face was covered by linen cloth, so he couldn't see his face. However, Gan Xie recognized him. Other than this person, there were 2 other people covered in yellow linen cloth. Although they had been asleep for a long time and most of their memories were blurry, Gan Xie could still recognize them. As soon as the 2 men moved their arms, they revealed their intentions. They opened their fingers with dark brown sharp nails, drawing a brown ray of light in the air. Along with the sharp sound of an arrow piercing through the air, they were like the fangs of a poisonous snake that could not wait to bite its target. Gan Xie didn't dodge this attack. Instead, he chose to face the combined attack of the 3 people head-on and collided with them. Boom! Their fists and arms collided with each other, creating shockwaves that stirred up the wind. Shockwaves spread in all directions. The fists and fingers of the 3 people covered in yellow linen cloth were like carefully forged hammers and spears. They easily left deep marks on the large rock Gan Xie was sitting on. Xiao Xian could even see the sparks that flew when their long, brown fingernails scratched the rock. In the next moment, these fingers, which were as sharp as the claws of fearsome beasts, were pointed at Gan Xie's face with cold, murderous intent. The 3 of them seemed to be suppressing Gan Xie and forcing him to retreat step by step. The 4 of them didn't have any weapons, but the sound of their fists, palms, and legs colliding with each other was like the sound of metal clashing against metal. Their fierce fighting style didn't seem like something a normal person could do. They were like wild beasts that had gone mad and were fighting with no regard for their lives. Every time Gan Xie took a step back, it was as if he was under great pressure. Every time he stepped on the ground, the grass would be blown away, the ground would collapse, the soil would break, and the pebbles would fly up into the air. The dry areas were even cracked from the impact. In just a few seconds, the trees were broken one by one. Some were broken by Gan Xie, and some were broken by the 4 of them. The originally flat ground was now full of potholes. Not only were the auras they exuded different when they attacked, even the energy they wielded was different from Chu Su's. The one controlling the 3 puppets was even stronger. Who else was around? Xiao Xian carefully sensed his surroundings again. There was no one else around. If the person who made the puppets didn't follow them, then there was another possibility. These 3 puppets could act without their master's help. These 3 puppets were given some kind of command. Chu Su only turned on the switch of the command. He wasn't the one controlling the puppets. Xiao Xian could see with his special vision that there were 2 types of energy in the 3 puppets' bones. They came from 2 different fire seeds. One was the fire seed energy of the Han tribe. It was the energy that originally existed in the 3 puppets' bodies. The other was the energy that seeped into their bodies to control them. However, this energy was different from the energy in the puppets Xiao Xian saw in the desert. It was also different from the fire seed energy he knew. It didn't seem to be complete. It was as if someone had purposely filtered this energy. The energy that conflicted with the fire seed energy in the 3 puppets' bodies was removed, leaving only the energy that could coexist with the fire seed energy of the Han tribe. These 2 powers coexisted in the bodies of the 3 puppets. For example, if the power of the Han tribe's fire seed in the 3 puppets was equivalent to the torso and limbs of a person, then the other power was equivalent to the brain of the body. It was the master of the body. As the 4 people fought fiercely, the cloaks on their bodies were gradually destroyed and torn apart by the wind from the fists and claws. The 3 people who had originally covered their faces with linen cloth now revealed their faces. The three of them looked just like Gan Xie when he first laid in the coffin. They looked like dried corpses. The only difference was that Gan Xie was in a state of suspended animation. The three of them, on the other hand, had lost their consciousness. From the moment they were turned into puppets, they were no longer the Han tribesmen they used to be. Gan Xie hit one of them and sent him tumbling in the air for more than 20 meters. Taking advantage of this small gap, he tore off the tattered linen cloth on his body and threw it away. It was already sunset and the sun would disappear soon. There was no need to cover himself. The injuries he suffered in the forest outside the Lu tribe had already healed. Even the scars had disappeared. The new injuries on his body were much more serious than the last time. Some of his internal organs were even damaged. There was no time to breathe. After he hit one of them, there were still two more. They didn't show any mercy and attacked Gan Xie's shoulders, abdomen, and limbs. Xiao Xian looked at the situation on the other side and frowned. Gan Xie's mentality wasn't right. Although the three of them were very strong, as if they were well-trained men of sacrifice, Gan Xie didn't even have the strength to fight back. He had been fighting them with brute force, but he didn't use his full strength. If he used half of the strength he used in the forest outside the Lu tribe, he wouldn't be in this situation now. This wasn't good. If this continued, even Gan Xie, who was stronger than normal people, would be crippled. Xiao Xian took a step forward and was about to help when Gan Xie shouted, "Don't interfere." Hearing Gan Xie's words, Xiao Xian paused and retreated back to his original position. He didn't want to go any closer. Since Gan Xie wanted to solve this himself, he would do it himself. No matter what the consequences were, he had to accept it. In fact, Xiao Xian didn't have to help him. Xiao Xian knew that Gan Xie didn't want outsiders to interfere. However, his actions just now were a reminder to Gan Xie that if he didn't change his attitude, he would really die. Gan Xie was also forced back by the three of them. Although he didn't show it on his face, his heart was filled with helplessness and anger. He knew that these three people wanted to kill him. After he heard the news from Robber 11, he thought about how he should face his former tribesmen. However, he still hesitated when facing these three people. After all, they were Han tribesmen. In this world, there were probably only a few Han tribesmen left. The other Han tribesmen had long disappeared with the passage of time. Gan Xie was distracted for a moment. A series of bone-cracking sounds came from his chest and he flew into the air. In the next moment, another person appeared behind him and punched him. Gan Xie's feet didn't even touch the ground before he was sent flying again. This was a true encirclement attack. Gan Xie had a strange feeling. It was as if his soul had left his body. At this moment, he was like a bystander, quietly watching his body get injured. The other three people didn't hold back their murderous aura at all as they attacked. The 11 Han tribesmen who had merged with their fire seeds were already stronger than others. One could imagine how much damage they could do. In fact, Gan Xie felt that he should give up on living. His tribe was no more. Besides him, there were no other Han tribesmen in this world. What was the point of him staying in this world? However, there was another thought in his heart. It was because of this hidden thought that he didn't mind looking for other tribesmen who had merged with their fire seeds. He also looked for people from the other side of the sea who no longer lived as a tribe. He wanted to get an answer from these people, an answer that would convince him. At this moment, when he was so close to death, Gan Xie suddenly felt that under the threat of death from these former tribesmen, he seemed to have seen through the thoughts in his heart. Gan Xie seemed to see 11 glowing figures appear in the endless darkness. They seemed to be talking about something. He knew that it was when the shamaness had chosen the 10 of them to solve the problem of the fire seed. She had called them over for a final talk. At that time, they were already prepared to sacrifice their lives for their tribe and their fire seed. But what happened next? In the dark void, their glowing figures gradually disappeared. First, it was the figure who seemed to be seriously injured. Then it was the others. 1, 2. They all disappeared into nothingness. In the end, only one figure was left. It was Gan Xie himself. Did the Han tribe disappear? No, it was still here. As long as he was alive, the Han tribe would always exist. Even if he was the only one left in the tribe. A single person's tribe proved that the Han tribe still existed in this world. It hadn't been abandoned by time. Puff, puff, puff. 3 people, 6 hands. 1 hand with sharp nails pierced through Gan Chia's shoulder from the front, 1 fist into his chest, and 1 hand from the back. It almost brushed past Gan Chia's spine and almost pierced through it. 2 more hands were grabbed by Gan Chia. The last hand was originally aiming for Gan Chia's head. However, it stopped when it was half a palm away from Gan Chia's face. Gan Chia looked at the 2 people in front of him. Their shriveled faces were no longer recognizable. However, Gan Chia could clearly remember what they used to look like. Unfortunately, you are already dead, Gan Chia said slowly. All of you are dead. Every word was like a boulder that had been lifted from his heart. But I can't die. When the last word was said, the last trace of sadness in Gan Chia's eyes disappeared completely. It was replaced by a cold glint, like an unsheathed blade. His red eyes shone with a bloody light. Su Lu and Chu Su didn't know what was going on when they saw the sudden stalemate. What's going on? Su Lu was stunned. Why did they stop fighting? Go on, just one more move. Chu Su felt his eyelids twitch. A chill ran down his spine. He had a bad feeling. Something was wrong. Something was very wrong. Take his head and come back. Chu Su yelled anxiously. However, the 3 puppets seemed to be frozen in place. They didn't react to Chu Su's words at all. Xiao Xian was also shocked by the situation. It seemed like Gan Chia was going to be dismembered. However, the situation was developing in a strange direction. It wasn't that the 3 Han people who were turned into puppets suddenly gained consciousness. Instead, it was that the power that supported their movements had changed. With his special vision, Xiao Xian could see that the energy in the 3 puppets was surging towards Gan Chia's body. The air around them began to change. Xiao Xian could clearly feel that the sweat on his body was quickly drying up. The water vapor in the air seemed to be rapidly sucked away. The energy of the fire seed. Xiao Xian was very sensitive to the energy of the fire seed. The energy of the fire seed was similar to the energy in Gan Chia's body. The fire seed of the Han tribe. Although the fire seed of the Han tribe was gone, it was still in the bodies of the 11 people. Of course, the 3 puppets that Su Lu brought with him had it too. But now, Gan Chia was sucking out the energy of the fire seed from the 3 puppets. A leaf fluttered down. Then more leaves fell. Xiao Xian looked up. The green leaves on the tree started to fall one by one. The wind shouldn't have caused this. Upon closer inspection, the stems of the falling leaves had dried up. Taking a deep breath, Xiao Xian whistled hastily. Cha-Cha, who had been watching from the sky, wanted to fight the 4 desert eagles several times. When he heard Xiao Xian's whistle, he quickly descended. Xiao Xian jumped onto the eagle's back. Let's go. Something big was about to happen. Gan Chia, who had been standing there quietly, suddenly widened his eyes and let out a long whistle. It was different from the last time at the Flaming River Castle. There was a faint rumbling sound, like a blizzard or a tsunami. It also seemed to be mixed with the roars of beasts. It was very strange. Following Gan Chia's roar, the aura around him started to increase rapidly. The mountains not far away started to shake and the ground started to shake. Even though Cha-Cha had brought Xiao Xian away from the ground, he could feel a chill on his skin. It was as if there was a powerful force attacking the forest. No matter how slow Su Lu was, he knew that the situation had changed. It was something they didn't want to see. His forehead was covered in cold sweat because of Gan Chia's whistle. Xiao Xian's actions reminded Su Lu of something. Quick! Su Lu whistled and waited for the desert eagles in the sky to come down. However, the desert eagles were too afraid of the danger on the ground. After hearing Su Lu's whistle, they only circled around and didn't land. Su Lu was so angry that he wanted to kill all 4 of the eagles and feed them to his slaves. However, now was not the time to be angry. He felt the shadow of death looming over this place. Su Lu screamed in his heart. If the desert eagles didn't come down, Su Lu could only run on his own. Chu Su saw that the 3 spiritual puppets didn't respond for a long time. He gritted his teeth and ran with all his might after Su Lu. Crack, crack, crack. Sounds like beans popping rang out continuously. Sula didn't even dare to look back. Gon Xie felt the energy gathering in his body. This energy wasn't pure. Some of it didn't belong to the fire seed of the Han tribe. When he absorbed it, this energy repelled him. This was the energy that controlled the three tribesmen. The moment he absorbed it, Gon Xie could feel his skin being torn apart. As he absorbed the energy from the fire seed of the three tribesmen, this external force entered his body. Gon Xie felt as if a knife was piercing into his bones, but he had to face it. Perhaps the person who made the puppets had considered this possibility. If Gon Xie forcefully absorbed the energy from the three tribesmen, not only would he fail, but he would also lose his life. Just as the external force was attacking him like a knife, trying to disrupt Gon Xie's absorption process, another force appeared in Gon Xie's body. It blocked the external force and allowed Gon Xie to continue absorbing the energy. This was the force Xiao Xian used to wake him up. This force had always existed in Gon Xie's body. Taking advantage of this opportunity, Gon Xie crazily sent the absorbed energy into every meridian and bone in his body. He sent it to every part of his body. But he had to live. He had to take back the energy that belonged to the fire seed of the Han tribe. Gon Xie could feel the power of the fire seed in his body surging violently. It was as if thousands of ferocious beasts were charging at him at the same time. The bulging veins in his body moved like wild pythons, jumping up and down. His tensed muscles moved and his bones creaked. It was as if they were being stretched, compressed, or reassembled. Lines appeared on Gon Xie's naked body. The crisscrossing totem patterns were like tough vines that lived in the driest parts of the desert. They crisscrossed and spread all over his body. Gon Xie seemed to hear the familiar sound of blood flowing in his veins, but he knew that it wasn't real blood. It was the flow of the fire seed's energy. As his aura continued to rise, Gon Xie let out another deafening roar. This roar was even more frightening than the previous one. It was as if there was a vast power within it. Everyone's hearts clenched as they listened to it. It was as if there was an ancient beast that had just awakened. The energy that Gon Xie had absorbed finally exploded at this moment. The murderous aura that erupted was like the night in the desert in Rock Hill City. It was cold and dry. Gon Xie's hair that had already rotted over time started to grow at a speed visible to the naked eye. It wasn't the color of a normal person's hair. It was white. On his bald head, strands of white hair rushed out from his scalp. They were lifted up by the shockwave and extended upwards. On his fingers, brown claws that looked like ferocious beasts extended from his bones. They reflected the last rays of the sun, but they didn't have a trace of warmth. A sandy yellow flame started to appear around Gon Xie's body. It rushed up from the bottom. The grass under Gon Xie's feet instantly dried up. It was as if it had lost all its moisture due to the high temperature. Under the ground, there seemed to be a powerful force that was about to break through. Boom! The sand-yellow smoke suddenly expanded rapidly, exploding like a sound wave, spreading in all directions. Everywhere it passed, the grass and trees withered, the leaves on the trees all fell, and the withered branches let out brittle cracking sounds, breaking and falling to the ground. Su Lu and Chu Su, who thought that they had escaped the danger zone, were also shocked by this scene. They turned around and tried to run further away. However, it was already too late. The sandy yellow flame had already spread to where they were. Their running footsteps became slower and slower. Their legs started to shrivel up from the soles of their feet. As for the three puppets, their bodies started to disintegrate from the places where they touched Gon Xie. It was as if they were weathering rocks. They were disintegrated into tiny particles of dust and were blown away by the shockwave. Gon Xie was the only one who stood there quietly. He was like a sharp blade in the cold desert under the night sky. Chapter 773. The sky was completely dark and the surroundings were dead silent. The sand-yellow flames started to fade until it completely disappeared. The aura of the Han fire seed gradually disappeared as well. Xiao Xian looked down and saw that Gon Xie was still standing in his original position. Cha-Cha was a little further away from the sand-yellow flames, so Xiao Xian couldn't see what had happened to Gonqie. He could only see that his bones were brighter than before. This meant that the fire seed's power had changed his body again. It was as if his body had been carefully forged. Out of the 4 people who were fighting together, only Gonqie was left. The other 3 had disappeared. The moment the fire seed's power was completely drained, the 3 of them were truly dead. After all, their bones had turned to ashes and their fire seed's power had been drained. There was nothing left to support their movements. However, he didn't know how Gonqie was doing right now. He didn't know if Gonqie was still sane. Xiao Xian didn't plan to go down for now. He didn't know if the person who went berserk just now would attack him again. On the other side, Su Lu and Chu Su were running away. They seemed to be affected by the sand-yellow flames. Their steps weren't stable and they weren't fast either. On the ground, Gonqie finally moved. His footsteps made squeaking sounds on the ground. The tattered cloaks left behind by the 3 Han puppets were blown away by the wind. Gonqie glanced at the cloaks and then looked away. He turned towards the direction where Su Lu and Chu Su were running. Rustle, 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 rustle. The footsteps were getting faster and faster. Su Lu and Chu Su heard the sound of footsteps approaching them. When they thought of the scene they just saw, they didn't have the courage to fight anymore. A strong murderous intent was approaching. They could even hear the sound of an arm cutting through the wind. Chu Su staggered and fell to the ground. One of his teeth was broken by a rock on the ground. He didn't even have the time to complain about his broken teeth. Chu Su grabbed a rock and threw it at the ground without even turning his head back. Bang! A few sparks flew in the night. The stone thrown by Mao Yu had already been broken into several small pieces. Chu Su listened to the commotion behind him, and his heart started to race. That ancient corpse didn't look any different from the others, so why did it become like this? What on earth had the Yin Jiao done? As he was thinking, Chu Su felt a burning pain on his back. It was as if thorns had swept across his back and scraped away his flesh. A blood-curdling scream rang out in the dark night, causing Su Lu, who was running in front, to shudder. He quickened his pace. Su Lu thought that if Chu Su could buy him some more time, he would be able to escape. However, after a miserable shriek, Chu Su went silent. Su Li's scalp tingled as the hissing noises approached him quickly. His legs were a little sore and numb, probably because of the yellow sand flame just now. He couldn't display his usual state at all. However, the person behind him was like a berserk beast, closing in on him with all his strength. Previously, Su Lu thought that the distance between them had widened and he still had a chance to escape. Now, he knew that he was too naive. In the air, Xiao Xian listened to the blood-curdling screams and the constant thumps on the ground. He knew that Su Lu and Chu Su wouldn't live to see the next day. Rather than calling it a chase, it was more like Gonqie was venting his emotions. Although the 3 puppets had lost their original consciousness and were now killing machines, they were still part of the Han tribe. Perhaps they had a good relationship with Gonqie a long time ago. Let's leave first and find a place to rest. We'll continue tomorrow. Xiao Xian didn't know how long Cha-Cha would remain in this state. He told Cha-Cha to rest on a nearby mountain. After flying for a whole day, Cha-Cha was tired. Plus, Cha-Cha felt that Gonqie was extremely dangerous. He had never gotten close to Gonqie before, so he was more than happy to leave. There were no longer any trees in the nearby mountains. Perhaps there were some plants and animals that didn't manage to escape in time, but they still had some life left in the yellow sand flame. However, they would need a long time to recover. At least, they wouldn't be able to return to their previous state in a short period of time. The next day was still a sunny day. Xiao Xian went over to take a look. Gonqie hadn't left yet. Instead, he was sitting on a rock, maintaining the same posture. No one knew what he was thinking. If it wasn't for his white hair and the sharp, dark brown claws on his fingers, Xiao Xian would have thought that he was the same as before. Gonqie's breathing had stabilized. When he heard footsteps approaching, Gonqie turned around. Xiao Xian saw a pair of bloodshot eyes and 2 fangs protruding out of Gonqie's mouth like a beast's. Xiao Xian was speechless. This was a big change. Seeing Xiao Xian's shocked expression, Gonqie looked at the claws on his hands. He activated the newly gathered fire seed energy in his body, and the totemic patterns on his body gradually disappeared. The dark brown claws retracted into his fingers. Even the 2 fangs on his mouth disappeared. No one knew what kind of lethality was hidden in this seemingly weak body. Gonqie's body structure was different now. Compared to a normal person's skeleton, there were many more strange structures. For example, his spine was mutated. Every vertebra was elongated horizontally. There were also many new structures in his arms and legs. It was just that they were covered by his skin and flesh, so it wasn't obvious on the surface. The fire seed could change a person's body structure. This was the first time Xiao Xian had seen this in a human body. Many warriors in the tribe would experience changes when they used their totemic power, but it was only temporary. When everything was over, they would return to their original form and have the same skeletal structure as the others. However, Gonqie was different. Compared to his previous form, the changes were huge even under normal circumstances. Moreover, Gonqie was able to absorb the fire seed energy in the 3 puppets for his own use. Xiao Xian was confused. Not everyone could do this. Seeing that Gonqie had no intention of attacking and seemed to be conscious and not hostile, Xiao Xian asked, "What do you plan to do?" "Work together. How about it?" This meant that he would return to the Yanjiao tribe's territory with Xiao Xian. They wouldn't go to the desert for the time being. Xiao Xian looked at Gonqie in surprise and nodded. "We'll talk about the cooperation later. First, you should find a cloak." After yesterday's battle, Gonqie was almost naked. Xiao Xian didn't want to bring him everywhere. After hearing Xiao Xian's words, Gonqie remembered that he wasn't wearing a cloak. No wonder he felt uncomfortable. The sun was out. Gonqie raised his head and looked at the sun in the sky. The sun couldn't hurt him, but it made him feel uncomfortable. After absorbing the fire seed energy from the 3 people, the feeling became stronger. It was strange. Not far away, Chu Su and Su Li's corpses were covered in a layer of dust. Even without the dust, it was impossible to tell what they looked like. Even if the people from Rock Hill City were here, they might not be able to recognize them. Last night, Gonqie's attack was filled with anger and murderous intent. After Xiao Xian and Gonqie left, the sun was hanging high in the sky. 5 figures appeared on a mountain. They were tribesmen who lived in this area. "What do you guys think happened here last night?" The people who came over asked carefully as they climbed up the mountain. Their eyes scanned their surroundings cautiously. Their tribe wasn't very close to this place, but they could still hear the sounds from here. They even felt a terrifying energy wave. However, no one dared to come out. One reason was that it was inconvenient to move at night. If they weren't careful, they could lose their lives. Another reason was that they felt that with their meager strength, if an accident were to happen, they would not have the confidence to escape. The sudden surge of power at that time was too terrifying. Could it be fearsome beasts? Someone guessed. Impossible. There are no fearsome beasts here. Unless they were brought here by someone. Also, the shaman said that the energy wave felt like a fire seed. We don't know what happened. Is there a tribe merging fire seeds? We've been here so many times. How can we not know where there are tribes? But the truth is, there are no tribes there. As they spoke, the 5 of them climbed up the mountain. Their tribe was further away from here. Every time they came here, they would climb the mountain because there would be some edible fruits on the mountain. They would take those fruits back when they climbed the mountain. Tightening the bamboo baskets on their backs, they panted and wiped the sweat off their foreheads. They looked in front of them. That was where the energy wave came from last night. However, when they saw the situation there, they were so shocked that they froze. Their eyes almost popped out of their sockets. Their jaws dropped and they didn't react for a long time. They rubbed their eyes and looked again. That's right, it was still the same. What happened here? The 5 of them stood at the top of the mountain, stunned. In front of them, as far as their eyes could see, the grass and trees had all withered. The flowers that should have bloomed in clusters during this season had all withered. There was no beautiful color. Everything, the green trees, the various flowers and plants, had all turned yellow. It was as if the vitality of this place had been sucked out overnight and turned into a land of death. When they finally came back to their senses, they rolled and crawled away from here. They ran back to their tribe. They wanted to tell the news to the people in their tribes so that they would never come here again. Maybe the people who came here would suddenly become the same as the grass and trees there? Not long after, there were all kinds of rumors in this area. Some said that a king beast had appeared, some said that a tribe had deliberately created all this, and some linked it to the people on the other side of the sea. In short, there were different opinions. After all, no one had seen the truth of all these changes with their own eyes. Chapter 774. Xiao Xian and Gan Xie were both very fast. Xiao Xian was carried in the air by Cha-Cha, so he was much faster than people on the ground. They didn't need to climb mountains. Gan Xie was different from normal people, so he didn't feel tired even after running for a whole day. In less than 3 days, Xiao Xian caught up with the main group in front. Seeing Xiao Xian return safely, the Yanjiao people finally relaxed. "Are you okay?" Guang Yi looked at Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian didn't look injured. "I'm fine. Those people weren't after me in the first place." Xiao Xian briefly explained what happened to Su Lu and Chu Su. Guang Yi looked at Gan Xie. Gan Xie had changed his clothes so he couldn't recognize Gan Xie's face. However, he remembered that Gan Xie's skin was always pale and he always looked like he was short of blood. He was also bald. Why did he suddenly have white hair? Moreover, his complexion was much rosier. How strange. Due to his own face blindness, Guang Yi asked the others and got the same answer. "He's changed so much?" "I feel like..." Guang Yi's eyes scanned Gan Xie's body. His instincts told him, this person seems to be more dangerous than before. The other Yanjiao warriors beside Guang Yi nodded in agreement. Although they couldn't tell much, their instincts were trained from years of hunting in the mountains. Xiao Xian told Guang Yi and the others about Gan Xie's transformation and the changes that happened. At least they had a rough idea so they could be prepared for anything that involved Gan Xie in the future. "You're saying that the forest we were resting in and the mountains nearby have all turned into dead lands?" If the person speaking wasn't Xiao Xian, Guang Yi would have thought that he was lying. The power of the fire seed is really strong. But it's understandable considering the power of our ancestors. Guang Yi remembered the power Xiao Xian used to bring them across the sea. That wasn't something a normal person could do. Yes, that's right. When the other Yanjiao people heard Guang Yi's words, they weren't as surprised. Especially the Yanjiao people who came from the other side of the sea. They had experienced it firsthand, no one knew better than them how shocked they were. After everyone left, Guang Yi lowered his voice and asked Xiao Xian, "He's not a threat to Yanjiao?" He pointed at Gan Xie. "His current enemy is Rock Hill City. Right now, he's still no match for them," Xiao Xian said. As for the Rain Tribe, they were still ranked behind Rock Hill City. Understood, Guang Yi already knew what Xiao Xian meant before Xiao Xian finished his sentence. Since Gan Xie's enemy was Rock Hill City and he was a powerful person, they could work with him. At the very least, they wouldn't treat him as an enemy. Gan Xie needed allies and Yanjiao didn't mind having another force to fight against Rock Hill City. The group met with some trouble along the way, but they were all dealt with. Although the Lu tribe lost some of their reared beasts, it wasn't a big loss compared to their overall strength. The reared beasts that were too weak to keep up with the group were all slaughtered in advance to be used as food. The cubs were locked up in cages and pulled around in carts. They met some traveling groups along the way. Initially, when they saw the Lu tribe's reared beasts, they had some ideas. However, when they saw that the Lu tribe were Yanjiao tribesmen, they gave up on that idea. Then, when they saw that even the Yanjiao Grand Elder was with them, they gave up on that idea. Those who frequented the Flaming River trading point didn't know the other Yanjiao tribesmen, but they still remembered the most important ones, especially Zheng Luo and Grand Elder Xiao Xian. The Lu tribesmen were very wary of these traveling groups. When they saw another traveling group, they became even more vigilant. The people in this group were all burly and looked like bandits. The axes and hammers they carried were stained with blood, but they couldn't tell if it was human or beast blood. There were beast hides and some other things in the carts they were pulling. They're from the Flaming River trading point. Guang Yi only needed to glance at the carts to know the answer. He didn't remember the people, but he remembered the beast hides and bones from the Flaming River trading point. Although the goods in the carts were covered with cloth, it wasn't very tight. Guang Yi could tell just by looking at a small corner. Xiao Xian looked at the traveling group and fixed his gaze on the leader of the group. He had some impression of that person. Coincidentally, the leader also looked over, so Xiao Xian nodded slightly in greeting. He recognized me. When the leader saw Xiao Xian smile, his palms started to sweat. If they really wanted to attack, they had to get rid of Xiao Xian as well. Otherwise, they wouldn't have any peace in the future. Even if they never went to the Flaming River trading point again, they would still be hunted down by the Yanjiao tribesmen if they stayed in their own tribe. Thinking quickly, the leader gave Xiao Xian a stiff smile. Then he turned to the people in the traveling team who were still watching the Lu tribe raise their beasts and shouted, "What are you looking at? Hurry up!" Thus, the Lu tribesmen watched as the traveling team left. Many of them looked as if they wanted to rob them immediately, but they held back and followed the team as they left. Looking at the Yanjiao tribesmen and the traveling group leaving, Bai Xing was secretly glad that they chose to travel with the Yanjiao tribesmen. This saved them a lot of trouble. When the group finally saw a stone tablet with a Yanjiao totem on it, the Lu tribesmen were the most excited. This stone tablet was a directional sign. It told them which direction to go to reach the Flaming River trading point. "We're finally here." Moving a tribe not only made them physically tired but also mentally stressed. Especially since they had just merged with their fire seed, they felt even more lost and uneasy. The Lu tribesmen didn't need to go to the trading point. Their destination was somewhere upstream from the trading point. "Since we're already here, let's split up." Xiao Xian led the Yanjiao tribesmen towards the trading point. After all, everyone was going in different directions. "Wait!" Bai Xing hurriedly called out to Xiao Xian and walked over in large strides. He was afraid that Xiao Xian would leave with his tribesmen if he was too slow. When he saw the Yanjiao tribesmen looking at him in confusion, Bai Xing forced an awkward smile. Brothers from Yanjiao, can we trouble you to bring us along again? We'll pay you extra. We definitely won't let you come for nothing." When Xiao Xian saw Bai Xing like this, he understood that they were afraid that the travel teams here would rob them. There were too many travel teams near the trading point and most of them weren't easy to deal with. Bai Xing's worry was not without reason. "That's fine too." Xiao Xian looked at the Yanjiao tribesmen. They didn't seem to be unwilling. It wasn't far anyway. Some of them were even interested in seeing which piece of land the Lu tribesmen had their eyes on. They wanted to test the waters first so they could visit them in the future. Hence, Xiao Xian brought the Lu tribesmen to their destination before returning to the trading point. There are more people at the trading point now. Xiao Xian noticed the situation as soon as he entered the trading point. It wasn't the people from the other side of the sea. Instead, there were many tribesmen with unfamiliar totemic tattoos. Some of them were probably here for the first time. Everything they saw was new to them and they were wary of everyone. Gon Jie silently ran to the secret underground room to continue thinking about life. Xiao Xian asked Zheng Luo about the recent situation at the trading point. These new tribesmen also lived on the banks of the Flaming River. However, some of them lived further away from Yanjiao. Some of them lived in secluded locations so they weren't discovered by Yanjiao. "What are they here for?" Xiao Xian asked. "They said they want to learn how to merge the fire seed from us. Many of them have already gone to see the chief. Go back to the headquarters and take a look. Gigu probably has many questions for you," Zheng Luo said. Xiao Xian didn't stay long at the trading point. He left and went straight to the headquarters. When Xiao Xian arrived, Gigu was looking at an animal skin scroll with a frown. On it was a map that Xiao Xian had perfected. "Xian, you're finally back?" Gigu quickly waved when he saw Xiao Xian. "There's something we need to discuss." Gigu looked worried. Xiao Xian had never seen Gigu so troubled before. It didn't seem like Yanjiao was in danger. It was probably something else. "What do you need to discuss?" Xiao Xian asked as he looked at the map. "Many tribes want to become Yanjiao's vassals." "That's a good thing." "I know, but there are some problems that we can't solve." Gigu told him about the problems that he couldn't solve. Ever since Yanjiao named the Flaming River, tribes in other parts of the mainland started to think about how to name the rivers, lakes, or mountains near their tribes. It was as if naming a place meant that it was their territory. It also carried a special sense of pride. Although most of the tribes living near the Flaming River were small tribes, they had their own ideas. As the name of the Flaming River spread and Yanjiao's influence grew, these small tribes started to think about naming their rivers. However, Yanjiao named the Flaming River using force to make everyone accept this name. People in other parts of the river might not be happy with Yanjiao's naming of the river, but they had no choice but to accept it under the threat of Yanjiao's brute force. However, in other parts of the river, the tribes kept arguing because of the naming battle. In terms of strength, everyone was equal. If they continued to fight, both sides would suffer. In the end, someone suggested asking Yanjiao for help to solve this problem. After all, Yanjiao was the second most powerful tribe in the Flaming River region. No one would dare to say that they were the best. Asking the boss for help was the idea of a follower. Naming is secondary. What I'm worried about is how to divide the area. Gigu pointed at the map. On it were the locations of many tribes and some typical geographical features such as mountains, rivers, lakes, and so on. Guihe thought further. Not only did he want to solve the problem of naming those people, but he also wanted to do more things. For example, he wanted to categorize those tribes. After quietly listening to Gigu, Xiao Xian nodded. I understand what you mean. Really? What do you think? Gigu asked expectantly. Do you have animal skins that haven't been written before? Yes. Gigu hurriedly passed him the animal skin, paint, and pen. Xiao Xian drew lines on the animal skin. Gigu compared the lines that Xiao Xian drew. The main river was the Flaming River, while the branches were the tributaries. Most tribes live near water sources. Xiao Xian pointed at the lines that he drew. He used red paint to mark the main river and blue to mark the tributaries. We call the area where the main river and the tributaries flow through the Flaming River Basin. Gigu's eyes lit up when he heard the words, Flaming River Basin. Xiao Xian's next words touched Gigu's ish. As for the problem you mentioned, we can use the water system to divide it. You're tuning in to the Passion Pages YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.